I will call this session of the Board of Revision to order. I begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. With me on the panel today are Richard Whitbread and Tracy Anderson. Our secretary is Kelsey Harrison, and the assessor today is Jason Brown. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rolls in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised, the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court or Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you haven't already done so, please either turn off your phones or put them on silent. We do permit the use of phones for information if granted by the chair. So swearing in, please.
Could you please state your name?
Jason Brown.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Would you like to swear in or affirm? Could you please say your name?
Michael Gallagher.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Rocky Newfield.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Because we have one item on the docket today that has a preliminary issue, the non-co-op issue, and Mr. Neufeld has legal representation with him today, we decided we'll start with that one, get it out of the way, and then Mr. Gallagher will be free to go. So, the preliminary issue is non-co-op, as I understand it. Is that correct? Could you please read into the record the particulars for this roll entry and then the reasons behind this being a preliminary issue?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the subject property is 2141 Logan Avenue, roll number 0709259700. We are seeking non-cooperation and the reduction of assessment as ordered in section 54.3.2. On page 2 of my evidence, at the top, we have the request for income information. 2016 was returned on time, May 2nd, 2017. However, 2017, the first request went out April 12th, 2018. A subsequent certified mailer went out with an end date, or request date for June 29th. We did not receive, in fact, I'm not even sure when we received it, but it wasn't even filled out till August 13th, 2018, and I'll get to that. Further page, from there we can go right to page 13. We can see the registered mail envelope at the top. At the top of that envelope, we see a tracking number, LP 578603815CA. So sent to Lancaster Developments Limited, 2141 Logan Avenue. Below that, we can see the signature for the registered mail. Once again, the same tracking number at the top, ending in 815CA. This was signed for June 7th, 2018 by G. McMillan. And finally, turning to the last page, this was the registered mailer that was sent out, was received late. At the top right-hand corner, we can see the due date, June 29th, 2018. At the very bottom right-hand corner, we can see it was filled out August 18th or 13th, 18, this corresponds to 44 days late, or 6 weeks and 2 days late. Based on that information, we're asking that the penalties be applied. Thank you.
Let's do those questions first. Mr. Newfield, questions?
I have no questions. Mr. Brown, so it's indicated here on the last page, on page 14, the date that it was, it's signed that date, obviously, that's August 13th, 2018. Do you have reason to dispute that it was received on or about that date?
It was filled out that date, so we obviously received it either on that date or at a later time.
And you're the assessor signing this the whole time, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the city received it on or about that date. Had the 2020 assessment roll been completed at that time?
We process the mailers as we get them. It stands to reason that if every property owner submitted them this late, there would be a problem, yes.
I get that, but in this case, the 2020 assessment roll wasn't complete, right?
That is correct. However, the Act states 21 days upon receipt that they're due. This failed to meet that criteria.
So what happened when you did receive the documentation, the information?
I can't speak to this property specifically. We get thousands and thousands in the mail coming in. They start coming in April on the first mailing. They're due May 3rd. We get the majority of them by that date. We start processing as soon as we get them.
So you don't get all of them by that date?
Well, just the ones, if it's past June 29th, we start taking non-compliance.
When in this case, does the 2020 assessment roll get completed?
I don't know offhand.
So you had a stack of them on your desk, is that right?
They get scanned into our system, and then, yeah, we go through them.
So when did you complete your sort of quote? Obviously, it's not a stack because we're on computers now. But when did your workload on the 2020 assessment roll complete?
I can't say offhand.
So would you say it would be well after you received the one for this property, the information?
It's possible. I don't remember.
So you can't tell me whether you completed your 2020 assessment roll workload in September of that year, 2018?
As far as I'm concerned, it was due 21 days after receipt. They failed to meet that criteria.
Had you completed in October of 2018?
I don't know.
Okay. So when issuing the penalty notice, was this an order from your department to issue that notice?
We seek penalties on anything coming in after June 29th, 2018 for this reassessment.
So is it fair to say that you don't have discretion to not issue the penalty notice?
That would be fair.
So all of that comes from sort of a higher power and you're just following orders in terms of issuing the penalty notice, is that right?
I suppose you could say that.
In your view, though, do the circumstances matter?
In my view, the more information we get, the sooner we get it, the better. Creates a better model for us. The fact, if everybody started submitting them in August, it would cause problems for the department.
So let's talk about the model really quick. So if we look at section 16.1 of the Act, which provides basically the basis upon which the assessor can request information.
Yes.
So, and you mentioned the model, but is it not true that basically the powers that allow you to do that, they don't speak to the model, they speak to the property being assessed? That's the basis upon which you have the right to ask for information, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And you'd agree with me then there's no mention of the model in 16.1?
That's correct. However, we use a model for the assessed values. So.
So when you received the information, you didn't notice there was nothing wrong about the information you received. There were no issues, were there?
It's an owner-occupied building, so Obviously, there's no rental income. They did fill out the expenses, which is great. Other than the date, it would have been fine.
So it was pretty standard information, just basically much like all the other ones you had on your quote-unquote virtual desktop.
That's correct.
So to process it, can you tell me what you would have to do to process, not necessarily this one, but sort of generally as they come in, the information?
We just enter the data.
Okay, so how long would that take you?
It depends on the property.
Say maybe 30 minutes?
Some of them are quite complicated. Some of them, this one would be an easy one.
This is an easy one. This probably maybe take you an hour?
Probably less than that, but
So you'd agree with me then if it took you about an hour or less to complete it, and you did receive it, and there was effectively, took no issue with the information received, there would be no prejudice that resulted to the city, is that right?
I mean, obviously, if one or two are late, it's not an issue. If they were all late, it would be an issue. It wouldn't be fair and equitable to allow one person to be late and not everyone else.
But as you mentioned before, you would act with discretion if you could. You just simply had to issue the penalty notice because the department head says you must issue the penalty notice.
We seek to be consistent in complying with penalties.
Those are my questions.
I just had a couple. So,
Of course.
you were talking about, you noted right away that it's owner occupied, right? So that means the mailer witness of no assistance in the model in regard to rents, or I take it probably vacancy.
In this case, that's correct.
Yeah. So then what you're looking for from an owner then is the utilities and expenses
In this case, that's
to
correct.
help with the model? No, sorry, I'm not trying to be cheeky here,
No.
but considering you don't have non-recoverables this year, you don't really care if they give you their non-recoverables, do they? Do you?
We're looking at a lot of it's for the utilities for the BA models.
Okay. Now, on that subject, you do know that the building is unheated, almost all, 90% unheated, right?
I did know that, and I believe there's very little water in some parts of it too. Yeah.
So, if someone was reviewing this property for inclusion in the model, do you think that they'd exclude it or include it?
I can't speak to that.
Well,
I don't build the models. So.
okay, no, that's fair. I was just, I'm wondering, like, I don't want to ask for your opinion or anything like that, but I'm sort of concerned that if you have a building without heat, without water, and you're looking for utility information, that this would probably be a pretty useless example, wouldn't it?
I would assume so.
And on the insurance, for example, non-recoverables, you know that this is a scrap metal recycling facility, so their insurance numbers would probably reflect more to do with liability than to do with the real estate.
It would have something to do with the business component, that's correct.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, thanks. I just,
Mr. Whitbread?
Yeah, just like to follow that up a little bit. But Section 16 of the Act, 16.2, provides you ability to request information. And when I look at 16.2, it says clearly, shall within 21 days. Shall within 21 days, not may within 21 days. So if I hear the department correctly, you're relying on that shall within 21 days.
That's correct. And I mean, the first mailing went out in April. Subsequent mailing went out later with a later due date. We're only seeking it past the later due date.
I understand that. So
So,
you
yeah,
actually
but
have
it's-
some leeway here
Exactly.
for the appellant.
Sorry, if you don't mind, Mr. Whitbread, what documentation are you referring to?
It's on my page 9, if
On
you
your
like.
page 9?
Well, I'm also, I'm in the act.
Anybody object to Mr. Whitbread making use of a copy of the act?
no, I wish we all had one.
Did you want to?
On page
roll it
9.
out on
Yeah,
the
we have-
phone?
It's up here, no, he's not.
It's in the.
Yeah, it's in the
brief as well.
assessor's brief.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 9.
All right.
Okay. And with that, are you okay if I jump over to 53?
Of course.
Sure. So 53.1 states clearly a board shall, not may, shall at a hearing place a burden of proof on the assessor on matters at issue. I'm getting the sense, and you can share, give me some feedback on this, that we're actually, or the appellant is placing the burden of proof on the department as to why they should not follow the mandate of the Act.
That would be correct.
That's the sense I'm getting from your responses. So we're very clear through all of this, then, the board shall, not may, in each of 16 and 53. Okay, I have no further questions on that point. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Newfeld, Mr. Gallagher, your information.
Go ahead.
I mean, I was going to provide the boardwalk decision. I didn't know if it was necessarily appropriate to put that to the assessor. I'm not really looking to rely on it in terms of questioning, do you agree with this, do you agree with that? It's a decision of the Alberta Court of Appeal. I think we're all familiar with. It's been relied upon countless times by this board and also by the Court of Queen's Bench. I was going to pass that out at this time. We'll be sort of relying on it in summary when we get to that.
In your summary with respect to this issue, or
Yes.
your summary at the very end of the hearing on this
Is that
application?
the only thing we're doing?
Yeah, that's the only thing we're dealing with is will be the penalty.
Penalty. All we're dealing with is the penalty. Trying to get out here quick for everyone.
Do you want to distribute
To
it?
do that now? I don't intend to go through it, I might add. It's just simply don't want to not,
What use would you like us to make of it if you don't intend to go through it?
simply just, well, I'm going to talk about in my summary just substantial compliance and general duty of fairness that are issues in this decision.
Now, you refer to your summary. We're at the point where we would like your evidence, information, argument against the notion that there was non-compliance. If we could have that in full now, I think that would be good.
Yes, so the intention was to rely, simply hand out the boardwalk case. I didn't want to inundate the board with too much material, nor do I think it's necessary here. We're relying as well on the page 9 of the assessor's brief, which sets out the relevant provisions of the Act, which I didn't think I needed to duplicate, saving paper. So effectively our position is there was substantial compliance here. There's discretion. The evidence of the assessor was that the decision to issue the penalty is in fact it's a policy decision by the assessment department. And although discretion could be issued in most cases, it simply isn't here. The Litcherson decision, which I didn't bring a copy with me, I didn't necessarily think that would be an issue, but it sets out that discretion is something that should be utilized by the assessor when determining these issues and not simply following policy, quote unquote, blindly. But in terms of the boardwalk decision and the reference and use I'll be making on that, speaks to substantial compliance. Here, yes, although the information was provided late, it was not provided so late that it could not be used. In fact, the evidence of the assessor was in fact that he was continuing to complete the 2020 assessment roll. It took less than an hour to take the information received and plug it into the computer and develop the data. In terms of the argument that it's the model, we need this for the model. Of course, the Section 16 doesn't really speak to model, and although the city can, of course, utilize the information they receive and apply it to the model, and there's definitely important aspects of that in the basis of the language of the Act, there's no mention of the model. It speaks to only the property that is under assessment. So, with respect to the model, it's not really, it doesn't really justify issuing a penalty. There's discretion in issuing a penalty, we would suggest. It's simply something that should be done across the board. As the assessor said, there should be sort of a case-by-case basis on many things that they deal with. There's dealing with properties all over the city. There's going to be various levels of quote-unquote compliance. Here, I believe we have substantial compliance in accordance with what is set out in the boardwalk. Just in sum then, effectively, there was no prejudice to the city. The 2020 assessment year wasn't complete. We look specifically at the section 54.3.2, which is the penalty provision that the city assessors are relying on. It says, where a person failed to comply with a request for information or documentation under clause 16.1c. Well, we would argue that there wasn't a failure to comply. There was, in fact, substantial compliance. They did provide the information. It was utilized by the city. And effectively, there's no harm, no foul in that. And with the discretion that the city has, I think in this circumstance, the board also, which has the discretion, the penalty should not be enforced in circumstances. Chad, Rocky?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, questions?
Just one. How late was the information in this boardwalk case?
It wasn't an issue of late information in the boardwalk case. There was a whole bunch of issues in the case. I don't believe one of them was late information. It had to deal with, the case deals with substantial compliance. There's different aspects of that. I'm simply making a reference in this case that it was substantial compliance.
Okay. And then, once again, this was in Alberta?
Yes.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitburn?
Would you come back to me in a minute, please?
Sure. Ms. Anderson?
I actually have no questions.
I have some. Mr. Gallagher, you referred to a penalty notice. What were you referring to as a penalty notice?
Sorry, perhaps I misspoke. I was referring to the penalty provision.
Provision.
Penalty notice.
Okay.
My apologies.
Sorry.
Speaking too quickly, I think.
Section 16.2 says that the person shall, within 21 days, provide the information.
Yes.
What does the Interpretation Act of Manitoba say about how to interpret the word within?
Well, I can't speak to how the Interpretation Act speaks to the words within. I mean, on the face of it, clearly it's seeking that it be provided within 21 days.
Okay.
It's also providing, though, that it's, person shall within 21 days of receiving the request provide information or documentation. Our position, of course, is that they did provide the documentation.
Do you have anything from the courts, from municipal board, that we would follow as a guideline, perhaps, that says that the 21 days is actually a flexible time? And as, if I interpret it correctly, you think that that deadline is actually when the completion of the role is instead, which is much later?
No, I think what the point that we're making is, and it's my understanding, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but my understanding is the board has utilized discretion in issuing the penalty under 54.3.2, and it is ultimately the board's decision as to whether that provision is going to be applied in circumstances dealing with substantial compliance is really the issue.
Are you aware of anything emanating from the municipal board or the court that says that where we find that there was a failure to comply, we have no discretion on applying the penalty?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't know if I can answer this question.
Maybe.
I'm just on my experience only with the municipal board. I don't recall seeing a decision based on lateness. It's always been zero, a yes or a no, they didn't get it. I don't think there's ever been a test case on how late can you be.
Okay, I'll put this a different way. Are you aware of any case in any municipality in Manitoba where a Board of Revision found that there was failure to comply but did not apply the penalty?
Oh, yes.
And what the court says about that?
Oh, I don't know what the court say about it, but before the Board of Revision, yes. And it's generally the substantial compliance issue where they said, yes, it could have been an offense, but it did not hurt the assessor's ability to create the roll, because the roll is released to the public in the beginning of June. As to when it's completed, we don't know. So it's a judgment call generally from our observations. The latest, by the way, the latest we've ever seen the board waive penalty was December 1st. Extenuating circumstances, but October a few times.
Mr. Gallagher, you've referred to the use of this information only pertaining to the specific assessment of that specific property. And if I take this correctly, it's your assertion that there's no reference here to the model and the use that is required of this information for the model that the assessor builds?
Correct. Under section 16.1, which provides the right of the 16.1 of the Municipal Assessment Act, that provides the right of the assessor to request information. That's the purpose of requesting information, is for the subject property.
And if someone made the assertion that the information or documentation that relates or might relate to, or that affects or might affect the value of the property, includes the ability of the model to affect the value of the property, would you say that that is an incorrect interpretation or a correct one?
It's a possible interpretation. I suppose the model can affect anything.
But on that point, the city assessor does not send out questionnaires for properties that that aren't revenue producing. For example, they don't send them out for vacant land to collect information to create a model, because it doesn't pertain to that. In this case, we have an environmentally impacted, unheated metal recycling facility that is not in the model because it's not a traditional style of building, so it would be outside the model to begin with.
Okay, those are my questions. Mr. Whitbread?
A couple of things. May I redirect to the city first?
Sure.
You had indicated that a letter went out after the original mailer.
Yes.
Do you have a date on that letter? June 8th, is that?
It was signed for, you can see on my page, I believe 13. Yeah, it was signed for on June 7th, 2018.
And there is no copy of that letter in your brief?
Well, we've got the envelope,
Yes.
which is stamped June 8th.
So that is the envelope for the letter that
For
went
the
out.
certified
June 8th.
mailer for the second mailing.
And there was, yes, so there was a previous request of the,
Correct, and that one went out in April, that's on page 2.
and that would be this document.
April 12th.
Right.
No, the one they filled out would be the second one. You can see the June 8th at the top right-hand corner is June 29th.
I'm too far now.
The very last, yeah.
Okay. And we don't have a copy of that.
The first one went out April 12th, and that one was due May 3rd.
Right.
Second one went out in June, it was due June 29th.
Okay, so you gave notice
Correct.
to the, you didn't lie in the weeds, so to speak, as this particular case talks to. You were very forward with your two notices to me. Okay, so back to the, back to you folks. Nicole Waldner is the controller of the company.
Rocky.
She's on the
Yeah,
brief submitted by
I
the city.
assume so. I've never met her.
Yeah, it says
Yeah.
Nicole Waldner, controller. Now, this would be a position, would you think that would be responsible for meeting deadlines? Like, my knowledge of controllers are constantly inundated with deadlines and has to respond by those deadlines, whether it's tax, city, provincial, federal. There's all kinds of deadlines required by this controller, correct?
I'm not exactly sure what her position is in the company, if that's her area of responsibility.
She says controller.
Well, yeah, but in their case, their major function is buying scrap metals and paying people for the scrap metals and shipping them out, and that's what most of their work is with. So I imagine, yes, her or somebody else would have had a duty to deal with tax-related issues.
Okay.
That's apparent, really
Okay.
obvious.
No, I'm okay. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, in that case, we will,
We just had one more issue, and we forgot to bring this up.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to the point that was raised just now, we have the tracking details here. Of course, we don't have the letter that actually was provided. If it was provided, we see that there's documentation here in the assessor's brief that shows that something was delivered and signed for. We don't know what that is. I've certainly never seen it.
No, and it's been a fairly well-established policy followed, and you're not under any requirement to follow what other boards have done, but generally, I've never seen a decision on a penalty without the full package of goods, which is a copy of what was sent out, so we knew what we were looking at. It's just missing a little bit of the pertinent information. So,
Mr. Assessor, questions on that point?
So this, what's contained on my last page is what was sent in. You can see the due date at the top, June 29th, 2018. So this was the certified mailer. They did receive it. They did fill it out. However, it was late.
Mr. Whitbread?
I'm fine, thanks.
Ms. Anderson? Though there isn't a copy of the actual letter in this package, can the board safely assume that there must have been a letter since there was an eventual response?
no, you can't assume anything, and the issue with it is that the penalties that are spelled out that you're being asked to impose today would be in the letter, and then the assessor then would have the opportunity to say to the board, no, look, we've warned them, here's a copy of the letter with which we warned them. It's sort of like a duty to warn any citizen of their rights and their requirements, and that has to come before the board as part of their evidence package. Much like a police officer, when he pulls you over, would have to
Issue a summons.
So you're saying that for proper procedure at this hearing, there should be a copy of that evidence. You're not asserting that no letter was received by the...
Right, and to be fair to the assessor, I've heard a common response to that, saying, well, we got the response, so why do we need the letter? We proved it was delivered. The point that they're missing here, it isn't to prove that the letter was delivered, it's to prove that procedure was followed. A citizen can in some cases plead ignorance to the law. Certainly the set of complex bylaws and regulations for taxation, proper warning is a requirement. Like, I know the difference between right and wrong. I know I can't commit a capital offense. I don't know I'm supposed to submit a mailer back. And I'm just saying that now because someone from CRA is looking for me to respond to a questionnaire that I'm supposed to respond to.
I thought you might relate this to speeding tickets. We'll take a short recess. Okay, we will resume this hearing following our recess, and we have found that there was failure to comply with the request by the assessor. Consequently, the burden of proof is switched to the applicant, and should there be a reduction by the board in the assessed value, there will be the section 54 3.2 applied to the assessment law.
Mr. Chairman, I have a recommendation to make.
Okay.
We're asking that the assessment be reduced from $951,000 down to $739,000.
We agree.
Agreed to that? Well, that certainly shortens up that part. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Where are they meeting in the meeting? So we're really meeting in our offices.
We haven't figured that out.
No, James meeting right now.
Oh, he's in our office. I think so.
So that was 2141 Logan. We will go to 2240. you, Logan, the first one on the docket. Mr. Assessor, when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subject property is 2240 Logan Avenue, roll number 130954231100. The department is willing to make a recommendation at $3,265,000.
Sorry, repeat that again?
$3,265,000. Based on an adjusted NO, or adjusted cap rate, sorry.
Mr. Neufeld?
We're accepting that?
All right. Thank you. And then move to 2201. Logan. Mr. Assessor, if you could read in the particulars.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subject's located at 2201 Logan Avenue, roll number 075691364415. The department is willing to make a recommendation on this based on revised square footage from 1,990,000 down to 1,440,000.
Could you repeat that again, please?
1,440,000.
440. Mr. Neufeld?
We're in agreement?
And panel members, I'm glossing over any questions by you. Sorry. If you have any, please stop me.
Right out, you bet.
So that was 2201. Now 44 Old Man's Creek. Mr. Assessor.
Subject's located at 44 Omans Creek Boulevard, roll number 1309542 quadruple 0. Defending an assessed value today of $1,535,000. Property is a warehouse consisting of one building with two premises, built in 1981, 19-foot wall height, zoned M2, land area at 79,952. We have a plan area at 16,313. However, there is some mezz space, which is why you see a higher gross floor area at 18,013. Land to plan ratio on this property is 4.9. Have some comparables on page 13. All located in the area, ranging from 2014 up to 2017 lease start dates. Sizes ranging from 12,884 up to 20,000 square feet. You see wall heights ranging from 11 to 22 feet. Year builds ranging from 1964 to 1990. And we can see the rents ranging from $6 up to $7.24. On page 4, we have our income workup for the subject property. We can see the 16,313 of the plan area plus the 1,700 mezz space, totaling the 18,013 square feet. We've used $6.11 for the main component of the building, $4.92 for the mezz space. This is an average of $6. This generates the gross potential at $108,036, 3.5 vacancy, 2% expenses, $3.75 shortfall, 6.5 cap. I'll note that the NOI on this property is $99,806 in the model. Capitalized at 6.5% generates the assessed value at $1,535,000. Just quickly on page 6, capitalization rates, industrial being the second column from the top. The city of Winnipeg's cap rates range from 5.5 up to 9.8. with the 20th percentile being at 6.34 and the 80th percentile being at 7.8. Subject is at 6.5, so it falls within those two percentiles. On page 10, I have some photographs of the subject property. The top showing a map of the location. So this is west of Route 90, right near the airport and Brookside Cemetery. Aerial view at the bottom of page 10. Street view on page 11. I have a drawing of the layout of the property on page 12. I'll note at the bottom that the part at the very bottom, that is the mez space. You'll notice there is 2 offices, a conference room and a lunchroom and bathroom in the mez space. This is functional space. It does warrant a rental rate. Quickly on page 13, shows the actual rents at $6.25 at the top. Quickly, just below that is the income statement. I'll just note that the net income on this property is $18,507. However, just above that, you'll see cash to owner at $75,100. And you'll see a mortgage interest at $9,068. If we only add those up, NOI plus cash to owner plus mortgage generates an NOI of $102,675. That is versus the assessment NOI at $99,806. I can. So adding up those 3 items would be $102,675. And the assessment's at $99,806.
And that was adding the cash to owner,
The mortgage interest and the NOI. And that's not mentioning that there is management recovery and et cetera, but I won't even go into that. Save you guys that argument. So based on that information, asking if the assessment be confirmed at $1,535,000. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Nichol?
Yes. Page 4 and 5, were these all produced from the model?
That's correct.
And were there any overrides?
I don't believe there was.
And in terms of selecting the leasable area, somebody has inputted this into the model as a physical input that they set plan area and somebody added mezzanine?
Yeah, you can see under tenant class, there's C2 for the 16,000, which is standard office,
Right.
retail, industrial finish. And below that is C6, which is storage, mezzanine.
So your square footage of 18,013 though does not agree with the actual rentable on page 13, does it?
That is correct.
And what standard was applied in order to put in a mezzanine? Do you have a standard you could speak to, or is it just someone made a call?
Generally, we'll put them in. What rate we put on them is debatable. This one has office finish, lunchroom, and conference room, so we feel it does require at least a rate. We did choose a lower rate at $4.92.
Do you know whether or not your selection for the mezzanine meets BOMA standards?
I do know.
And your comparables to support this, page 3, are these from the model or did you select these?
These are as submitted by the owners of these properties.
But who selected them for?
I selected them.
Okay. Did you review these to see if they had mezzanine space in them included in their lease rates?
I did not.
So potentially you have an issue where somebody reports a rent to you, they could or they could not have a mezzanine, you don't know if it's plan area, gross area, and then you turn around and apply an additional rate to the mezzanine.
That's possible. I did show a wide range of rents. Feel that they...
You're aware of the brokerage standard in that you are not allowed to use mezzanine space in your brokerage statements for lease, rent, or sale?
Unaware of that.
In industrial, I'm speaking of.
Take the word for it.
And you mentioned that there was consideration that it was improved. Was it inspected?
I did not inspect the property. Just trying to see the last time it was inspected, 2013.
Okay. You made a statement about reconciling page 13 in your model. In that reconciliation, you did neglect to put a vacancy risk on the owner's statement, did you not?
That's true.
And your model would at least apply a vacancy.
That's true. I'm just showing that we're at least, the
Right.
model did a good job.
But your model also did not apply a non-recoverable rate, but there are non-recoveries in the statement on page 13, are there not?
It appears that most of it's recovered.
Well, I'm going to suggest you, I quickly added it up, that there is a shortfall of $2,320.
Okay.
And that would be taking the total revenue, subtracting the office rent to indicate 3,463 is recovered, and then taking the expenses and subtracting, as you suggest, cash to owner mortgage interest, and that's 35,743 are expenses. So, okay, but the point here is, of course, is that the owner, single tenant, so there is no vacancy, but you've still got to apply a vacancy risk.
That's correct.
So far.
We're not relying on the actuals. I'm just showing that we're in the ballpark.
Maybe next year's model. You can take that one away. Making light. Your capitalization rates, these were all taken from the model, and you, page 6, it would come out of, you only really have one row that you applied in the industrial world.
Correct.
So the 20th percentile 6.34, 80th percentile 7.8. And page 7, are these properties that went into the model?
I'm unaware. These are just to show that, just a sample. Of
Okay, but were the model rates and the rates on page 7 both calculated the same way, in that was that they took the mailers and the income from the mailers and an actual sale?
I can't speak to it. I wasn't involved in the capitalization.
Okay, well, it says here, developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information, dividing the property's net income by its sale price.
That would be correct.
Yeah, so the source of the income information in both cases, and I think the same statement is said on the second last one of these paragraphs on page 6, that the income to create capitalization rates came from the model. Came from the mailers, correct?
I'm unaware. I wasn't involved in generating industrial capitalization rates.
I believe it says it in here. I just wanted to make sure we understand how they were created, that's all.
The second paragraph says capitalization rates were derived from model-generated estimates of net operating income and sales price that were time-adjusted data.
Okay, so it's the model.
So these ones were model-generated. These ones were actuals,
Okay.
from what I can read.
Okay, and the model, of course, was created, as we learned out in our penalty discussion, from the forms that were returned to by property owners, correct? Correct. To your knowledge, has there ever been an attempt to try to link these statements of income on mailers to an actual sale date?
Not to my knowledge. Unaware.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
Did you inspect the property?
I have not.
You didn't.
It was inspected in 2013, as per our notes.
You have notes as to the condition of the building at that time?
It doesn't specifically say. It just says the building is office in the front, storage upstairs, large warehouse with loading docks.
So it describes the building.
It describes
not
the building.
condition.
That's correct.
Do you have any permit information in terms of
There was no
It's been done.
permits on this property in ours, but we only get the permits when they're, if we don't get electrical permits or anything like that, we just get when they're major renovations
Right.
or change of occupancy.
But a roofing replacement,
I don't
major
know if we
repair,
ever get that, but it's possible, yeah.
but you have nothing.
No.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Anderson?
Just to dig a little bit deeper into the condition of the mezzanine, you answered Mr. Whitbrand about not having seen the property yourself, and that previous description was a little bit less than your description of there being offices and lunchroom and storage. How is it that we know that there's offices and storage? Is it just by your diagram here? Do you know that there's good ceiling height there? Can you attest to
I'm
that?
unaware. The person who inspected it said they defended the cap rate, which tells me that they were okay with the condition. It does say that, I won't say it. It says what Rocky's cap rate was in 2014, but I won't get into that.
That's a great
Okay. The difference in leased space between your version and then the figure that Mr. Newfold brought to our attention on page 13, the 16, is that the mezzanine? Is that the difference between them?
That's correct.
Okay. Is this a constant differential between the assessor and agents?
That's correct.
As to how to delineate the leased space. And the assessor is always including the leased, always including mezzanine?
Yes, depending on the condition would affect the rates. If it's only used for storage and it's not really usable space, I would put a nominal rate on it. 'Cause it is still, if you didn't have that storage, you'd have to go get a storage unit somewhere else. So it is being used. I feel that it at least deserves a nominal rate.
I see from one of the photos, the company is ASL. What is who is ASL? What do they do in this building?
I believe it's a shipping company, but a distribution service.
Is the warehouse heated, unheated?
I believe it's heated.
Okay. And reasonably functional for its use?
It looks like it's in good condition from the
Functionally
outside.
obsolete?
Built in 1981, so it's not, still has some life left in it. Looks like it's well maintained. From the pictures, the roof's in good condition, exterior's in good condition.
Okay. With respect to cap rate, you're using 6.5, which is middle-ish within your range. Why would it not be at the bottom? Why would it not be at the top? Why is it in the middle?
So it is, if it was 15,000 or less, it would be 6%. But because it's over 15,000, it gets a half point. And then there was no adjustment for location on this property because it's good location. And then the age, 1981. So our cutoff is 1980 to 1994, so it just falls within that range. The previous range is 1955 to 1979.
Okay, that's all my questions. Mr. Newbold?
I have a little bit of rebuttal. New material. Well, I'm not going to speak to the management fees because for some reason we never put any in on a document.
We'll actually shorten things up by an hour or so.
Oh, yeah. wait, can you tell me back?
One more.
Yeah, purple, and we got one more here.
Thank you.
Maybe just before you start, Mr. Sesser, did you come up with a blended rate? Is there a blended rate calculation that you have handy? Or?
For the rent,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was an average of $6. Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Just give me 10 seconds. I'm looking for the clause I was looking for. The document that is text is been presented several times, and it speaks to the assessor's supported rates that have been brought to the board and as support, and I think I've gone over that document. Now, in reading this, I was looking for a broader global work that I could at least show the board on international valuation, and that's the document purple. And this is a 200-page document, and I've just given the excerpts on the concept of market value, and then the other second half of it has to do with dealing with goodwill, which is not pertinent for today's discussion. But there's a better breakdown and discussion of the concept of market value. For example, in the first document, it talks about why you don't use, for ratio studies, why you don't use portfolio sales. And here is actually a good discussion as to why you don't, because it doesn't indicate a local market. But the one I wanted to point out was on the second page under 30.2, number C. Now, this has to do with market value and cap rates specifically. A cap rate is not a fixed instrument. It's valid on the valuation date. That means it's not time adjusted. It's not from previous year's data. It has to be the data as of the valuation date or the reported sale date. Now, what we've been doing in our work, of course, is when we do a cap rate, we're doing a valuation, we're there when the transaction takes place. So therefore, our cap rate is as of the date. And I was thinking about this because I was in a hearing 2 days ago, and the assessor was making a point of, he had all these statements of income and they varied, and why would you pick this one? And my answer was, well, it wasn't whether I picked it, it's the one that was pertinent as of the valuation date. Section C, markets and market conditions may change. The estimated value may be incorrect or inappropriate at another time. So this is, now this by the way, this committee, International Valuation Committee, they are headquartered in London, England, and they're acting as a non-profit umbrella organization to try to codify and consolidate valuation standards around the world. Generally, the United States with USPAP, Canada with USPAP, and Tagova in Europe with their standards. We're always on the same page, and we're not bound by international valuation standards, but we do embrace them because this is exactly what we say. It was just a better reason for my criticism of when the city assessor takes mailers, which in some cases you can see the dates are a year to a year and a half ahead, or sorry, before the sale took place, they're not valid. Mailer cap rates are not valid because they have to be done at the time of sale, not from the mailer. Anytime the assessor brings, and not the assessor today I'm speaking of, I'm speaking in general, anytime the assessor brings forward mailers to you and says, here's the income, and oh, here was the sale, there we have a cap. You don't. The standard is as of the time of sale. That's my new issue to deal with on valuation, and now I'm just going to go to my valuation. Unless there's questions on that.
Mr. Assessor?
No question. Thanks,
Mr.
George.
Whitcomb? So what did I do?
Okay.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding this. You're then critical of this table of cap rates that the assessor uses, and critical of the cap rates that they're generating via a model, because the cap rates reflect sales over a certain period of time that is not April 1st. It's some period of time prior to April 1st, whatever the reference year is of a particular year.
Right. And
that's correct?
Yeah, and the most compelling one is on the assessor's page 7, the last one listed, 1100 Waverly, which sold in September of 2017. The last income and expense form they would have received in April, 6 months prior, 5 months prior, and it would have been for a period of the previous year. This was a building that was being absorbed back into the market and had been for the last 5 years. So the statements and the income would have been completely unreliable because we had a fast-moving object. It was owned by our client, we managed it, we were the brokers who were leasing it out. We knew that as it filled up, it would be put up for sale. And it was filled, it was put up for sale, and it sold. So the mailer won't reflect that. That's an example I could speak to from first-hand information. And there were 294 Portage and 177 Lombard on their list at the top, office properties that are in the same boat. What made me think about this was specifically a question I was asked at a hearing involving 1830 Portage Avenue two days ago, because the expenses were varied, and we knew that the owner was improving his property and spending a little bit more money to put it on sale. Where do you rely on a cap? And in our business, we rely on a cap by going through the details and going through the expense line and asking the questions. What happened here? What happened here? Ask the purchaser and the vendor, when you made your deal, what were your expectations? And looking at the point of sale, our famous example that we always hear the debate on in your 333 ward, where the city says 5% because they have an appraisal and they have income and expense forms. We had the agents doing the deal who said this is what they agreed on. So we are having a disjointed, the model is disjointed when it comes to cap rates. Now the model can give you historical information on rents. That's fine, because there's a stated period that when they're in place. But the model cannot generate a cap rate with accuracy because they fail. The analysis and ratio studies and mass appraisal lacks the immediacy of the deal. Now, there are times, I know at municipal board, where there have been a couple of cap rates in question, both parties went back to the drawing board to look for that information. And when one has the time, you can do it on site specific, but the model isn't doing it, and that's why the model's flawed.
So a cap rate pops out from a sale at the time of the sale, because you don't know what it's going to be until the sale price is finally negotiated.
That's correct.
But the buyer and the seller are looking at income and expenses over some previous period of time, probably several years.
They would look, generally 3 years of statements are reviewed, yes.
Okay, so I'm not quite understanding how the assessor's approach is invalid in that the assessor is also looking at several years of income and expense information. and taking that sale price and applying that to come up with cap rates.
Two major errors. There's a gap between the last mailer and the sale date. That's a major error. The second major error is the vendor and purchaser, when they get together and they review them, They actually go through them. And that's, again, I'm getting back to my apartment example, because they knew at the time that they were discussing these costs that were incurred. Were they one-time costs? Were they repair costs? Or was it a symptom of an ongoing maintenance issue? In this case, it was sprucing the joint out for sale.
So in other words, when the two parties are looking at the income and expense statements, they may wind up stabilizing it a little bit differently than, say, an assessor might, because anybody's stabilization is subjective, correct? And also, you're saying that there is a somewhat different motivation going on than what there is with the assessor. So consequently, what you come up with at any point in time about the income and the expense,
yes,
it could be different than what the assessor has.
In essence, I agree with you. I don't like the word subjective. I would say an educated analysis. When we do an appraisal, we call them estimates. But and a great case in point is my own evidence, where it's funny. It's one that's never been challenged. But on my page, it's an apartment, by the way. But on my page 37, the bottom apartment was a sale, and because I knew both the vendor and the purchaser, I got their permission to actually obtain the documentation that they sat down with and agreed to a sale price on. This was their decision as to that these were reasonable expenses, these were reasonable incomes, this is my NOI, and on that basis I'm buying for this amount. That's a first-hand one, but that's very typical of the arrangement. And one of the other reasons I like to use properties where I was involved in firsthand, because I could be in that conversation. Another one happened to be, well, there were a few of these at the bottom, so on page 34 on Portage Avenue. I was there. Top 200 Portage. I interviewed all the parties, and of course our famous 305 Broadway, that's our building, all the financials were there. I knew the owner, knew the purchaser, and our famous dispute on the Slate portfolio, again, worked for the vendor, worked for the purchaser, worked with the property manager. That's when we narrow these issues down. So we could say, you know, I had a bad year prior to sale because in an apartment case I blew a rooftop unit and came out of the expenses. But that's good now for 20 years. So they get together and say, you're right, so we're not going to put that in our expenses for the purpose of the sale, or we're going to use a reserve instead.
So then, taking the bottom one on page 37 as an example, cap rate 6.62, what cap rate would the assessor have applied to that? Do we know that?
I don't know if it's been to hearing yet.
Yeah, okay.
I got a short-term memory, not this week.
Okay.
No, it hasn't been this year.
All right. That's all my questions. We've finished with rebuttal.
Okay.
We will carry on with your information.
And so 44 Omens, page 3 is the statement. And really, I don't care what square foot you build on it. It doesn't matter. If you use the paid rent, it's irrelevant. Well, it's actually, it will show a lower value if you have higher square footage with the same paid rent, because the shortfall rate will be higher, because there's more space to apply a shortfall to. So when you go with paid rent, which in this case is clearly 101,956, apply it to a larger area, doesn't matter. It's going to show a lower value. Now, the reason, of course, professionals, and this is a property that's managed by a professional using BOMA-approved measurement standards, because we have to. And our comparables on page 4 are done from our brokerage company who follow the brokerage standards. We don't count mezzanine. It's not rentable. The rare exceptions when it can happen is if it's separately demised and has the capability of being separately rented. In our appeals here, I think I have 2 or 3 properties in the industrial world that fit that description. One is 11 Salto, and I can't remember what the others are. Because there are so few, our standard, the professional standard, is do it that way. And anyone who prepares it differently, and I'm not saying the assessor, but I'm saying I see this in private practice too. You know, you want a quick bump on your appraisal, get a higher value, take rents from main areas and apply them to all the areas, upper areas in a building. It is an offense. It's a violation of standards. Now, anyone's standards, realtors, appraisers, property managers, anyone who follows BOMA, a member of BOMA, can't do it that way. But in our case, I'm ambivalent because if you go with that number but go with the paid rent, I can drop my number for a higher shortfall. What we're using here on vacancy is a market, and our numbers are on page 5. There's a typo here. It says central. We're not at the bottom of page 1. It's actually not the number from central. It's the Inkster rate. So this would be influenced by Inkster. This location, it's
Sorry, where are you?
I'm on page 1. The bottom box,
there.
box.
Okay.
It says central, but it's actually the number from Inkster. What we do is we like to look at the overall investment rate, which is 7.2%, and then the specific rate. I couldn't call this West End because it's not influenced by West End. It's close to Moray, but I think Inkster is its greatest influence. So we look at the overall rate of 7.2 and its nearest influence of 6.6, and we're applying 6.9% for the investment rate. And it didn't pack my bag. This is from the Johnson report, and I do have the entire document to refer to, and it helps us to look for anomalies in the vacancy rate to see if there's one big vacancy throwing things off, or if the sample rate was too small. So we are disagreeing with the assessors across the board, one size fits all vacancy rate, because it varies by district, varies by type, and it fails to address the industry reported rates. We didn't put in a number for non-recoverables, so it's pretty hard for me to rebut that. The actual non-recoverables are $2,280. I'm not changing it because that would be wrong, because we'd want to go lower, and we'd have to warn the assessor. Ethically, we'd have to warn the assessor. So that was an error on our part. We're using a structural reserve of 25 cents a square foot, and on an industrial property that generally would refer to concerns for the roof and a reserve for a roof. A roof's going to last you 20 to 40 years, extended through proper maintenance, and it's going to, repair cost will be about $20 a foot if it has to be replaced. That's $320,000. Our reserve at $4,000 a year is primarily for that. The shortfall, we had used the actuals on taxes and repair and maintenance and an estimate on utilities of $235 a square foot. That number was taken from the city's business number, which we find relatively reliable for vacant use, because industrial facilities may draw power for their needs, and vacant unheated properties, like we heard today, may have none. However, the mistake made here was the site doesn't have air conditioning, so our shortfall is much too high. So fortunately, things have worked out great for me, because if I change it back to $375 a foot, that number is $42.21, and my non-recoverable is at $22.80. I'm only $100 off. So that's why I'm not changing any of the numbers. Error, two-way error. even Steven, as Jerry Seinfeld says, everything's the same. So our NOI 84,254, and be very, very clear that in regard to the statements, that's consistent with the statements, and the only additional deduction from the statements would be vacancy and shortfall, which of course as a full building is not reporting any, but as an investment property must carry one. Now our capitalization rate on this property, first I'll start with page 24, which is the Collier's rates, and these are the real rates ranging from 7 to 8.25, and there is very little distinction between single tenant and multi-tenant. That's something that the Vancouver head office puts in as a differential. We're not really seeing that in our market, but that is the range. The standards for this are listed on page 22 and left column middle, and as you can see, the building does not meet the standards. Its biggest issue is it's a bit smaller, but the point is that Winnipeg is a smaller market overall, so on a city standard, it's close to meeting our standards. It would be likely, in my opinion, considered in the Collier's report at the upper end of the range. And we have several comparables on pages 31, 32. We have the famous Slate portfolio, which I'm always willing to discuss at any given time, 8.6%. And a couple of other properties that we are looking at, 1535 Seal, 8.29, Paquin at 8.47, and then 35 Winfield, which is half a block away, at 9.48%. Now, we are higher than that. On page 5 is an excerpt from the October 2019 Manitoba list of contaminated impacted sites. The entire Logan Industrial Park is on this site. More specifically, it appears to be the north side of Logan that's on this site. And so what that means is the previous use was deemed to be an impacted variety type, and anyone who has a site here will have to do a phase 1 and a phase 2. The repercussions in the marketplace are that money is harder to borrow when you're impacted because you're deemed a brownfield, not greenfield, and major lenders, most all European lenders, half of the North American lenders won't advance money for anything that's impacted, whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I mean, site just can't secure financing. Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, which is likely the largest single real estate investor in Canada, will not buy or invest in an impacted site, no matter what. It means that you have to go to lenders who either have lower ratios or higher rents, and this all impacts the cap rate because the cap rate is fixed to the interest rate of the loan. Remember, a cap rate was developed that determined for bankers to determine how much of a loan you can support on your property. If the interest rate goes up, cap rate goes up. That's just the sheer nature of the relationship. Right? It's not an artificial thing that you just apply because it's in a book somewhere. It's always based on money. What does it cost to borrow? Borrowing cost high, cap rate higher. And that's why we're at 9%. That's my presentation. Thank you.
I did have a couple questions, but Rocky addressed them in his presentation, so I have none more. Thank you.
Mr. Whitford?
None.
Ms. Anderson?
Also none.
Okay, I got a general one again. You're saying that it should be the BOMA standard that is used.
Yes.
Well,
most people, no, I'm not saying it should be used. I'm saying that most people apply. A professionally managed property, the first thing they do when they take a job on, they do a BOMA measure.
Okay, so the mezzanine would be excluded.
Yes.
The assessor is including it.
Yes.
Presumably, the assessor includes mezzanines everywhere.
No. No, it's an inconsistent practice. they do not include them everywhere. So it's not a question.
Depending on whether it is used for storage or actual office use.
Yeah, and there'll be times when we point them out to them and they'll take them out, but it's not like, if everyone's suffering with the same mistake, why should it, we're all being treated equally, equity is met? No, it's not that issue at all. It's an inconsistent approach.
Well, that is my question. And if the Board of Revision in effect uses the BOMA standard and excludes the mezzanine, but the assessor has basically used that everywhere else, aren't we creating an inequity relative to other properties?
Is an inequity fair to protect when it's wrong? Is an equity right? It's fair to protect it when it's wrong. You
Go
can't.
back to Leela Farms.
Is that? I'm not allowed to argue law. I can tell you about a municipal board case involving Skirfield, Melrose. I remember they used to have a coffee roaster there, and my client bought at Shaw, and the assessor insisted on assessing the entire tower and the platforms that were within it. And so the board clearly found that no, it's the wrong standard. You know, the industry doesn't use the standard, and the explanation from me would be that the city assessor doesn't have the right to create their own standards, whether it be on value for non-recoverables or measurement standards. The legislation tells them to go for market value. The market has decided the measuring standard, and the real inequity here is that the assessors are using comparables from rents that are reported to them. Here's the issue. If this one was used from the mailer as a reported rent for an assessor to rely on, what would he report? He would report 16,313 square feet at 625. That would have been put here on this page, because these come from the mailer. And the mailer is right here. Then you can't turn around and say, now I'm going to change my standard. You know, they've got half the standard embraced. It's the application that they're missing. And what I'm saying is you know, the way their model is set up is the same sort of errors I see in my work as an appraiser when we go to arbitration, where somebody's trying to find a few more dollars on value to sustain their argument by mixing up the methods. It's just not allowed. We have a line to follow. There is a standard. You use rents that are reported to you from reliable sources, and you don't apply them, change the rules on the application.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there was another municipal board order. My house. I took it to the board because the assessor said it's 2-story, so we're going to take plan area times 2. And I have this area at the front where it's open. I said, no, you can't. My evidence was the real estate standards, which were in effect, and of course they agreed before the hearing that they were wrong. You have to follow the market standards.
With that, I will draw this one to a close. Thank you very much. We will take a short break and then resume. Is it on 71 Bannister? Or?
It is not.
It is not. Well, let's deal with the agreed one first, and then it'll make us think that we're moving along quickly here.
I love that.
Mr. Boardroom, yes, swearing in.
I'm sorry. Bradford Scott Borgstrom.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Is this public hours always?
So, which one is there?
111 Bannister.
111 Bannister. All right, we will deal with that one first. That is item number 6.
Yes.
Okay, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subjects located at 111 Bannister Road. roll number 0709191100. Department's willing to make a recommendation at $2,085,000.
Obviously, I've not had an opportunity to discuss it with my client, but we will not oppose the recommendation, nor will we make further submission on it today.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will move along.
Mr. Chair, are we allowed to know the basis on that?
Oh, you certainly are.
Reduction?
I'm being way too expeditious here.
You are, aren't you?
It was
Slap my wrist.
RNOI, and I believe Mr. Borsham's cap rate.
Do you recall what that was? Just for the
775.
775.
3/4 point.
It's never about one number or the other, it's always about what looks reasonable.
Well, don't fault us if we take the same approach. Then, let's go to 71 Bannister. Mr. Assessor, when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subject located at 71 Bannister Road, roll number 0756907190. Defending a 2020 assessed value of $4,986,000 today. This is a industrial warehouse building, one story, built in 2009 with a 23-foot wall height. Property is zone M1, manufacturing. Land area is at 96,467, and the leasable area 35,618. This makes for a land to plan area of 2.71. On the following page, page 2, subject property leases, we have Vega Processing Limited. Lease start March 1st, 2017. 5-year lease. They rent the entire building for $8.50 per square foot. I have some rent comparables on the following page. The lease start dates range from May 1st, 2012, all the way up to August 1st, 2017. We have size ranging from 22,504 up to 33,577. Wall heights range from 19 to 28. Years built range from 58 to 16. And the net rents per square foot range from $8.95 to $10.95. On page 3 of my evidence, so we're using 35,618 square feet at $9.02 per square foot, 3.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, 3.5 shortfall, 6% cap. Generates the assessed value at $4,986,000. I will just note that at $8.50 with our parameters, the value would be $4,694,000.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, $4,694,000.
No, sorry, the first part of it.
Oh, that's with the actual rents on this building are $8.50.
Oh, okay.
So that's just with the actual rents. We're slightly higher at $9.02.
So at $8.50 rent, then your final figure is?
$4,694,000. However, I do feel that there was some tenant inducements generating the lower rate. We'll go right to page 10. Subject property is located on Bannister, once again near the airport, just west of Route 90. Aerial photograph on page 10. Street view on page 11. Once again, newer building, built in 2009. Page 12 shows some of the amenities of the property. High performance building, concrete slab on grade, electrified parking, 23-foot clear ceiling height, 3 insulated overhead doors, 2 with dock levers, 1 at grade. Plan area on page 13. I have 3 newspaper articles, all from the Free Press. First one is on page 14, dated 2012. This speaks about the subject property. I'll quickly just go over some of the highlighted passages. Larger industrial properties are becoming a hot commodity in Winnipeg, industry officials say. Demand is high, space is low. Next page, page 15, low interest rates, limited supply of available product, and strong economic outlook are helping to fuel demand for industrial space. Centerport is helping to generate new industrial activity, particularly in the northwest quadrant, which is the quadrant we are talking about today. Lots of interest for all different sizes of properties. Skipping down to the last 2 highlighted passages, realtors said that one of the things holding back new construction was a reluctance on many industrial tenants to pay higher rental rates in new buildings in the range of $9 to $11 net per square foot versus the usual 5 to 6 for older space in the city. And then the attitude is changing when they realize they have no choice if they want modern, high-quality space in a particular area of the city. Page 17 is the second article from the Free Press. This one's dated 2009. This is during the construction of the subject property. It was developed by Crystal Properties Limited. He goes on to say that their product starved, so to speak. Good time to be coming into the market. Industrial vacancy rate hovering at 2.6%, so he's optimistic. They built this on spec, or without a tenant in mind. It did sit vacant for a bit, but they did get a long-term tenant in shortly after. Page 18, he just states that there was very little competition, and the industrial market is still strong. Lots of interest from companies outside the province. Just trying to find space for them is tough sometimes. And finally, the final newspaper article. This was when the tenant moved in, 2012. New regional distribution center, Star Produce Limited, Burnaby-based. They occupy the entire building. Page 21. They state that the central location and close proximity to the U.S. border make it an ideal place to route shipments through. Going down from there, they state that they put $1 million into the building to bring it up to their requirements. And the final highlighted passage is they state that industrial land is not available, prices have skyrocketed, but if you found a good piece of land, you would build another industrial warehouse. Page 23, I have a permit. This is for the construction of the new property. You can see at the top left, dated 2009. They are stating a total project value of $30 million on this permit and a declared construction value of $18 million on this permit. Page 24 shows drawing of the building. Page 26, this is for the interior alterations for the office and warehouse when the tenant moved in. Food processing and warehouse distribution center. It's showing that they put another $150,000 in. The newspaper article stated it was closer to $1 million. Page 26 shows the financial statements that were provided to the city by the owner upon a request. This just shows the actual rent at $8.50, which was signed in March 1st, 2017, for 5 years. Based on that evidence, we ask that the assessed value be confirmed at $4,986,000. Thank you.
Questions?
I do have a number of questions, some of which I am optimistic that we can apply to the remaining properties on today's docket. And so we'll start with the approach to the city, or that you're using here today. All of your rents in here, let me rephrase that. All of the rents in calculating each property's value is model driven?
On this property, yes.
And the balance of the properties today?
I believe so.
And similarly, a model vacancy rate?
Correct.
And so in terms of that, do you know what the vacancy rate is in this area?
3.5%.
As of when? No, let me come at this another way. I understand that that's the model rate, yes?
Correct.
So in terms of the market in general, do you know what the vacancy rates are for this area in particular?
For industrial property,
In this area, yes.
we're saying that it's 3.5%.
So does the department subscribe to the Johnson report?
We do.
And so have you had an opportunity to review that document?
I have not looked at it.
You have not looked at it. The Johnson report is an independent publication, correct?
That's correct.
And you haven't taken the opportunity to review it?
I have not.
In terms of the capitalization rates that you're presenting today, they're all model-driven?
Correct.
And the model-driven capitalization rates are based on hypothetical rents?
On model-driven rents.
Model-driven rents. So let me take you to your, sorry, I did back my briefcase, I had too much paper. Let me take you to your page 6. And in the second paragraph, so for the 2020 general assessment, the April 118 reference date, capitalization rates were derived from model-generated estimates of net operating incomes, net operating income and sale prices that were time adjusted to April 1st of 18. That's how they were done?
Correct.
And so any property that's sold would be included in there?
I don't work in the modeling section, so I don't know.
Don't know. In fact, previous testimony before this board has confirmed that that would include vacant properties, correct? Don't know. Would it also include owner-occupied properties? Now, this isn't your first industrial docket. Have you not taken the opportunity to check on this?
I have not.
If I take a look at the page 7, and at the bottom, the department, in each industrial brief I looked at, shows these same 4 rental comparables, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't do these extractions?
I did not.
Do you know who did?
The department did it.
The department. Do you know who in the department did? Okay. Were you aware that Mr. Penner gave evidence, say 3 weeks ago, under questioning from Mr. McPherson on the panel, that these were calculated on a different basis than the model calculates them?
I believe it says it right at the top. The following is a sample of actual sales. Net operating income developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information.
Right. And so you are aware, are you not, that the very first one on that list is 90 Park Lane, correct?
Correct.
And are you, or I'm assuming you're aware, because I know that you've seen the information before, that property was actually vacant at the time of sale, right?
Unaware.
Don't know. And we've heard about 1100 Waverly previously. Do you know anything about that property?
I do not.
And you haven't, arising from the industrial hearings that you've been in this cycle, you haven't checked on it?
Nobody's questioned me on it so far.
Now, you made a reference, I believe your words were, you quote, feel that there were tenant inducements
Yes.
in this property. And in fact, in determining rents, we don't consider tenant inducements, correct?
Correct.
Let's take a look at your pages 26. This is the income and expense statement that was provided in response to the Section 16.1 request to the owner, correct?
Correct.
Is there any line item on there that talks about tenant improvements, tenant inducements?
There is leasing commissions in the non-operating costs.
Right. Is there any line item in there that talks about tenant inducements or tenant improvements?
There is not, however, there is leasing commissions.
I understand that. But you alluded to tenant inducements involved in the lease.
I will change my statement to leasing commissions then.
Leasing commissions are typically paid by the owner, correct, and not the tenant?
Correct.
Okay, so let's take a look at page 27. This is a rent roll that was also provided in response to the Section 61 request made to the owner, correct?
Correct.
And you'll see there at the top, towards the right-hand side, top row, this is as of December 31st of 17, correct?
Correct.
And if we look below that, you'll see there the rent commercial is $8.50 a square foot. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And that's the stated rent in place.
Correct.
And so if we look a little further to the left of that, under the column headed lease start, lease end, you'll see there that this lease, by way of renewal or step up, started March 1st of 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've included in your rental comparables excuse me, rents that, I'm just going to grab my copy, rents that date all the way back to 2012, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And as we move through the docket today, we'll see a variety of dates in terms of the lease start dates for your rental comparables, but if that's a range that you would typically consider.
2012 going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Obviously, I try and find the most recent ones, but
Fair enough. Now, in looking at the information on page 27, this is the rent that the owner is obligated to receive for at least this period of time. He can't achieve any more legally under the terms of the lease, correct?
that's the rent.
Similarly, that lease rate is binding on any potential purchaser of the property, correct?
Correct.
Now, if we take a look at the information that you've included on page 20, under the picture and in the second paragraph that starts Star Produce, I just want to go back a second. You indicated on the permits that there was 30 million and 18 million roughly in terms of construction value and total permits, right? So this company that occupies this property here in 2012, do you know if that's for this particular building?
If which was for it?
The building, Star Produce LTD,
Yes,
that's the tenant in this building.
that's the tenant.
Now, they process fruits and vegetables, correct?
They distribute fruits and vegetables.
So, let me just take you through the wording of the paragraph. Star Produce LTD, a Burnaby-based firm that supplies fresh fruit and vegetables and ready-to-serve fruit and vegetable platters to retailers and wholesalers in Western Canada, is opening, talk about the distribution and fresh cut facility in Northwest Winnipeg.
That's correct.
So they do some processing of fruits and vegetables in this location. And so in terms of the construction permits, you agree with me that a significant component of that would be for processing those things, is it not? Would it not be?
I believe when the tenant moved in, it was just a shell, and then they state here that they are spending $1 million to develop interior to suit their needs. That's on page 21, the second highlighted passage.
In terms of a shell, though, isn't it true that certainly the warehouse component would have lighting, HVAC systems in place, So not really shell space.
Well, of course, it was a finished warehouse. They added freezer space, you can see in the picture.
And so $8.50. So if we just turn back again to there we go. If we turn to your page 15, this is an article from 2012. This building, and you corrected yourself, but this article actually refers to speculative building, and it's a fair statement to say that this building was built on spec, right? It was constructed without a tenant in place?
That's correct.
Okay. And so if we look sort of in the middle of the page, you'll see a line there that starts Crystal Properties. You see that?
Did that in 2009?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So that's talking about this company building this building in 2009 on spec, but that the property also sat empty for about a year, correct?
Correct.
And so is it your view that the rental rate agreed to between the landlord and the tenant reflects the only rent that they could achieve for this building?
I feel that the rent possibly is a bit low due to the tenant having to add $1 million of their own money to bring it up to their needs.
You already agreed with me that the 850 square foot is all they're entitled to legally collect, correct?
Correct. But the building had $1 million of improvements as well, so they weren't selling it.
So, a couple more questions. In an appeal or on appeal before a board, whether it's here or at the municipal board, it is a site-specific valuation that we are to determine, correct?
I'm defending the model value.
I understand that, but and expediency aside, the requirement is to determine the value of the property, correct?
Correct.
And that would require a site-specific valuation, right?
Site-specific valuation isn't always as easy as just looking at the rent. There's just a lot of variables involved.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I do have some rebuttal evidence.
Let's finish the questions. Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm fine.
Ms. Anderson?
I'm fine.
As am I. Rebuttal then.
Agree with me.
There we go.
So this. 5 files, 3 for the doors, that's 9. No, that's not enough. And I always dread paper cuts. I hate paper cuts. Some people don't like the fingernails on the chalkboard, and me is paper cuts. And file folder cuts, the worst.
You'll be happy if we ever go all electronic, won't you?
You know what, they've been saying that for years, and I just see more and more trees dying. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this, and then I'll give you this one. Oh, wait, look at this, I got one. So this just talks about, and you'll recall that Mr. Brown indicated that he had no knowledge of any of the information on page, I believe it's 7 of this brief. I can tell you that Mr. Penner gave evidence a couple of weeks ago, and I'm on my way here as well, that they were in fact calculated on a very different basis. But I can, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, because sometimes we submit it depending on what goes on. If we take a look at page 1, this is the first rental comparable there. This was actually owned by Pirate, and I've also included their news release on this, and I'll go over that in a moment. But to summarize, in their news release, they said that they relocated the tenant that was in there to a different property. They actually expanded their space on a new lease. So this property was vacant at the time of sale, and in fact, it was acquired vacant and subsequent to that, it was an owner occupancy circumstance. So the calculation of a cap rate on a vacant building, when they're suggesting that it's based on the income in place, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And in fact, that's contrary to what's the information that Pirate has provided. That news release actually specifically references that on page 5 of our information. I highlighted the section there where they talk about the disposition of 90 Park Lane. We've got a picture there right next to the highlighted paragraph. And again, they're just saying that they relocated the existing tenant and signed a new long-term lease in the different buildings. The asset, if you look at the very last line in the bottom paragraph, the bottom highlighted paragraph, the asset was unencumbered at the time of sale and was not classified as an asset held for sale. So it was a vacant building. The second one is 1100 Waverly, which you'll already know from Mr. Neufeld's testimony about that building. They were working at leasing it up. There were some presumably vacancy issues in there. They subsequently sold it. The owners subsequently sold it. Colliers was involved in it. But I can also tell you that when you look at the sales verification form on this property, I have looked at it. The current owner is a client. I don't have the permission of the client to bring it in here, but I can tell you that on there they actually manually wrote office and warehouse. There is a significant component of this 1100 Waverly that is office space. There's a restaurant in there, there's a laser tag facility in there, there's a gym in there, there's an engineering group in there, the LCC, the Liquor Control Commission is in there. Subsequent to our preparation of this, I actually had the opportunity to question directly somebody from the Liquor Control Commission about that space, and they confirmed to me that it was 100% office, no warehouse space, so that's 100% office. The community living services is also office space, so it's a bit of a hybrid, not a true industrial property. So, with all of that, and before I get into our brief, perhaps Mr. Brown.
Question, Mr. Brown.
I'm just looking at a leasing ad for 1100 Waverly on Space List.
You're using your phone?
Yep. Oh, I was supposed to ask, wasn't I?
You are supposed to ask, and then
Sorry.
we all need to be able to look at the same thing.
I understand.
You're using it.
You would agree that there's such a thing as a flex warehouse that includes a higher degree of office space and office finish?
Some do. In this particular case, though, being classified or being shown as an industrial rent comparable when in fact the uses in here, restaurant, office space, the gym, the laser tag, are not what you would typically expect to find in industrial. And in fact now, if you want to talk about some of that space, certainly prior to the reference date, you're starting to see some of those facilities moving out of these types of buildings into shopping centers. Laser tag facilities, gymnasiums, event park shapes. Certainly an example that readily comes to mind. Because the lease rates have dropped so much in retail, arising from the, I don't call it a crisis, but the demise of bricks and mortar retail. So they're able to obtain space in better locations. So these, it is a mixed use in here with the restaurant, but again, the owners on the sales verification form that was returned to the city in response to the request, they actually manually wrote on their office and industrial. So it's a mixed use property.
Which is the definition of a flex warehouse, correct?
You don't typically find restaurants in flex warehouses. You typically don't find laser tag facilities in warehouses. You rarely find 100% in something of that age, that vintage. You rarely find 100% office fit out in spaces.
What are the ceiling heights on 1100 Waverly?
The information is shown on yours.
More than 20, most likely.
I don't know.
Okay. Terracon, would you consider that office?
Different operations, very different business models, both in their St. Boniface Industrial Park and the space that they've developed of Canaston. It's a very different type of model. I don't know how the city has classified them. We don't work for Terracon. I do know from some clients that we work for, in terms of business assessment, much of, for those tenants, the space is 100% fitted up with office. Newer buildings, different model.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbeck?
No, I have no questions.
Ms. Anderson?
Just have a kind of a general question, maybe you can help me. If your rebuttal evidence is to negate the comparables, comparables by the city, then you find that the other two comparables are suitable?
Yeah, we haven't had any information to rebut what they're showing there. So,
That's it, thank you.
I have no questions. So then, your evidence.
So the assessor has described the physical attributes of the property, so I won't go over that again. We will start on our page 7. And just for clarification, and it's interesting to me, the city shows the gross floor area for this property as being 35,618 square feet. The owner reports a leasable area of 35,829. Now, it's a very small difference and it's nominal, but that's the leasable area that we're using. There's no disagreement between the city and us, but it's always interesting to me when there's a leasable area shown that's greater than the gross floor area.
Is there mezzanine?
Not that I'm aware of, but if we look at and we've included in our information as well on page 17, that, and Mr. Mikkel was quite correct, when owners report rentable areas, they almost always exclude mezzanine space for a number of reasons, including that the space underneath would have half the height, so less utility. And it's also interesting, and it's a question that wasn't asked, and perhaps we could ask Mr. Brown. When the income and expense questionnaires come in, do they enter the information based on what's on rentals and then apply an area including mezzanine space? Double counting, if you will, I don't know. So it's an interesting question. You'll see there on page 17, and we'll start there while we're here, that was in fact an escalating lease. They signed a lease amending agreement in 2012 for 5 years, covering the period from November 1st, 2011 to February of 2017. We're using the step or renewal, and if you look at the bottom, it's term renewal, but I consider when a tenant has a long-term lease, it may be technically a renewal, but in my world, it almost feels like a step up. But we're using the rent that was in effect March 1st, 2017. You'll see there that there were escalations periodically. So in my view, and I looked at the lease rates for what I would consider to be certainly equivalently located properties up in the Inksbrook area, on Inksbrook Drive, on Meridian Drive. $850 a square foot is certainly well supported by rental comparables in that area for newer buildings than this one even. So 2009, this one built in 2009, as I said, so that's the rent that we're applying at $850 a square foot. We disagree with the city's vacancy rate. We have included, I'll get you to refer to it over here. In our capitalization rate study, I did take a look and provided some very basic information about vacancies for industrial properties in Winnipeg. So if you look at our industrial cap rate study on page 8, we talk about industrial inventory and vacancy. And the tables that we show on page 8 include owner-occupied, include government-occupied, and so that necessarily distorts downward the actual vacancy rates. And you'll recall Mr. Neufeld talked about investment inventory, which this is. It's a rental property, it's investment. If we look at page 9, you'll see the citywide vacancy rates, and this supports what Mr. Neufeld was talking about verbally. When you look at the, I don't care how far back you go, it's not 3.5% for investment properties shown on page 9 of that brief. Significantly higher than that. I did consider also, every time I do an appeal, I take a look at what the Johnson report, and I've got some extras here with me today, what the Johnson report talks about for this area, this particular property, with its roll number would be considered St. James. And the investment property overall in the St. James area for 2000, so as of December 17, that's their year-end report closest to the reference date, for St. James for the years leading up to 14, 15, 16, and 17, 8.6, 6.9, 7.1, 8.5. Those, and this is in this information, I don't include the area specific in each brief, but the vacancy rates are considerably higher in this case than 3.5%. We can talk about the other properties as we go through them, but it's not that low. And so we have applied a modest 4% vacancy rate. That's vacancy and collection loss. So there are occasions where tenants will default on rent payments, and landlords always, sometimes they can recover, sometimes they can't. If a business fails, they're just going to be out of luck. So the 4% includes both vacancy and collection loss. So that's our reasoning in applying the 4% vacancy rate here. There's no disagreement with respect to shortfall. Altus Group, with respect to non-recovered expenses, continues to advocate for the 7% non-recoverable expense ratio. We have filed a separate report. I'm happy to go over it in detail, but I'm quite certain that you've all heard it before, and in fact heard it recently. So I will say only that we continue to advocate for that 7%, and I'll leave it open for questions if you have any. With respect to capitalization rates, the city, in this particular case, has actually applied a 6% capitalization rate. When you look at even their model rates for industrial properties, that falls below the 20th percentile. And in fact, it falls very close to the bottom end of the range where you might consider it to be an outlier. I will very briefly touch on the rest of our industrial capitalization report. And Mr. Neufeld talked about it already. We looked at 4 different things. The cost of rent, what it costs to borrow, the mortgage rates, as I said, what it costs to borrow. We looked at the market reports, including the broker reports for CBRE and Colliers, and I know that Mr. Neufeld already talked about that. The market reports for Colliers and for CBRE, we have included those rates, pages. We've included the Q1 2018s. For industrial at page 27 of the cap rate report. And you'll see there for industrial properties as reported by Colliers, for the broker reports between 6.5 and 7.25, whether it's single or multiple tenant. So there's a range between 6.5 7.25%. We also went through some cap rate extractions. We do not have anything this new as being transacted in the market. So it's always going to be based on our judgment and experience in terms of what we assign. We have varied from the city's model rate of 6, so we suggest 6.5 in this case based on all of that. And so we go through the mathematics on page 8, and we're looking for a reduction down to $4,100,000 based on all of that. And I believe that is the information we wanted to cover for this talk.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your capitalization rate study, page 34, you have CBRE, Canadian cap rates?
Hang on. On page
Last page, inside of it though.
CBRE.
Yeah. 34.
Well, 34 is not the last page, right?
The inside of the last page.
Industrial, yeah. So they show a range for Winnipeg, 6 to 6.5 for A, 6.5 to 7.25 for Bs.
Okay, and this is an A?
Under the benchmarks for CBRE, I think that's probably how they would classify.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
Just one maybe illuminating our issue with the 200 and some square feet differential here. I note on page 17 of your brief, there are some notes. On page 27 of the city's brief, there are no notes. And the bottom line of your notes shows building note, 202 square feet.
Hang on.
Mechanical room, yeah.
Mechanical room?
Yeah. So we would have taken that out.
So that's...
So you're okay, so I want to be clear on this. You're saying that you altered documents that you're submitting in evidence?
I didn't alter it.
Some,
I
okay,
cut and pasted.
So for each and every property then, will you please identify whether or not there is missing information?
I mean this
When
was
we-
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I don't.
For clarification, when we redact, it's very clearly identified as such. I did not get redacted. You will see some rebuttal evidence today where I've actually blocked it out with black and redacted it in that fashion, some rebuttal evidence that will be coming. It's a grave concern to me that the department, we take an oath at the onset of this hearing to tell the truth, the whole truth. And so when we are removing relevant information that the city is providing in support of their valuation submission, that's a concern for me. So it's not the first example I've heard about, certainly recently, where the department has done this. I've heard some instances far more serious than this one.
So
I think
But-
perhaps...
But yeah, please, yeah,
If you don't mind,
I'm expressing
let's stay
a serious
factual
concern.
whether the 200 was in or not,
Yeah.
and I think we'll steer clear of other issues.
202 square.
I heard the city give evidence that they had not included that 200. The mechanical
It
room
makes sense that
is
that's
not
what
included.
the difference is, of course.
All right. Further questions?
Well, except that when you look at the gross floor area of the
Perhaps,
building as
Mr. Borsom, in summary, can you address your concern with this rather than at this
I
point?
typically don't summarize.
You could this time. I'd rather stick to questions by the
Sure.
panel at this point, which is
Yeah.
where we're at in the process.
Just to clarify, the leasable area that the landlord is showing here is larger than...
We have a $200 discrepancy, and let's leave it at that.
And it could be that.
Okay, Mr. Whitbread, further
Yeah, it's
questions?
a 211 discrepancy, but the mechanical room is 202. That's established by the documents we've got here in evidence. You've given evidence that the 202 would be backed out of your leasable square footage,
That makes sense, yes.
right? Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but it makes sense.
Okay. Can you... No, I won't go down that path. I'll stop there.
Is that
Sorry.
necessary?
No
No
questions.
questions? No questions. All right, thank you. Summary?
No, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that I expressed the concern that I wanted to express.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was 71 Bannister, now we'll go to 21 Old Man Creek. Mr. Brown, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
Subject's located at 220 Oldmans Creek Boulevard, roll number 13095411,900, defending a 2020 assessed value at $2,493,000 today. This is an industrial warehouse consisting of one building, one story, built in 1997, 22-foot wall heights, M2 zoning, land area at 57,894 and leasable area at 18,156, and we have a land plan area of 3.9. On page 2 of my evidence, there is a subject sale history. This property sold in 2013 for $1,925,000. We did conduct a company search.
Sorry, where are you saying that?
Yeah,
Oh, am I on the wrong? 220 Omens, right?
21. I thought you just misspoke when you said
Sorry.
20. Yeah, sorry, that's the last one.
Out of order. I apologize for
Yeah,
that.
I'm like,
I heard the square footage and I
And
was
me
like, wait a
confused.
second.
Okay. that's that one. Okay. Address 21 Oldmans Creek Boulevard. Roll number 13095319,600. Pending a 2020 assessed value at $1,343,000. Once again, industrial warehouse, one building, one story, built in 1992, 22-foot wall height, zoned M2, leasable area at 9,638, and a land plan area of 3.79. Subject property lease on page 2, Schneider Canada Incorporated, lease start 2013 for 5 years, so ending just after the reference date. Leasing the whole building for $11.86 per square foot. I have rental comparables on page 3. These are ranging from 2015 all the way up to 2018. I guess that would be post-reference, wouldn't it? Let me cross that one off. Top one. So 2015 ranging to 2017, 5,000 square feet up to 15,000 square feet. Wide ranging from 13 to 26. Effective year built ranging from 51 to 91, to 08. And net rents ranging from $8.90 to $10.68. Income workup on page 4. I'm defending a rent per square foot of $8.98 per square foot, generating a potential rent of $86,549, minus 3.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, and $3.75 per square foot shortfall. Capitalize that at 6%, which yields the value of $1,343,000. Page 10 of my evidence, once again located in the same area as preceding properties, just north of Brookside, west of Route 90, and just east of the airport. I'll note at the top left-hand corner you can see the Center Port Canada Way. This is definitely in proximity to that. Aerial photograph on page 10, so this backs onto Oldmans Creek on the corner of Logan and Oldmans Creek. Exterior shots on page 11. And then a plan on page 13. Reception, boardroom, and some open office, some storage. Page 14 showing the income and expense statement that we received from the owner. I'll note the net operating income is only $4,424 difference from the rent income, showing that these are net rents. At the bottom is the tenant form, so 9,638 square feet. They're showing a monthly rent of $9,523.80 times 12. That would be $114,285. Divided by the square footage is $11.86 per square foot. And based on that evidence, we ask that the assessment be confirmed at $1,343,000. Thank you.
Mr. Boardroom.
Thank you. So if we take a look at page 14, that's the income and expense, again, the income and expense questionnaire that was submitted to the city in response to the request.
Correct.
And the information at the bottom of the page, is anything missing there? I don't know, I'm just asking.
No, there's only one tenant.
Fair enough, thank you. And so, again, we don't consider tenant improvements, correct?
Correct.
And so if rent included a repayment of tenant improvements provided, we would exclude that from the rental rate, right?
Yes.
So as we take a look at page 3, these are all rental rates within the city's system, correct?
Correct.
And they would have been entered from the information returned by the landlord, right?
Correct.
And it's possible that in each and every one of these instances that they may include things other than just rent, right?
We use the information as it's presented to us, so if it would show that, we wouldn't use it.
And so where something looks weird, like when I see, speaking for myself, right, when I see rents like 1068, 1018, 939, that raises all kinds of red flags with me. Typically what you find with net rents is nice round numbers, right? $8, $8.25. When you start to get into odd numbers like that, doesn't that trigger alarms with you that would warrant further investigation?
I see all kinds of rents all the time.
And so even seeing odd figures like that, it doesn't, you don't consider that worthy of digging down further, correct? Is it fair to say that you've not had the opportunity to review the income and expense questionnaires for these properties?
That would be fair.
And in fact, the city doesn't retain the income and expense questionnaires, do they? They shred them, they scan them and they shred them, right?
They're all available.
They scan them and they shred them, right?
They're available in a document management that we have. I can bring them up on my desktop.
And so we don't have the original paper documents. They are electronic scans, correct?
Correct.
Just as an aside, and it doesn't apply to any debate, but as an aside, so when the department, and I know of some examples of this, where the electronic version is misfiled, how does that impact on a request for compliance?
Misfiled how?
Electronically misfiled. I'm certainly aware of circumstances where that's happened. Oh, no? Okay. Fair enough. Now, this tenant has been in there for quite some period of time, correct?
5 years leading up to the reference date.
Up to the reference date. And so, would you agree with me that any information that would be known as of the reference date is properly considered?
Correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Mr. Anderson.
I have no questions.
Nor do I. Mr. Porter.
Okay, so I'm going to start at the back of our submission. anytime there's a lease renewal close to the reference date, I investigate more. And in this case, I got a copy of the lease renewal from the landlord. It was in fact a renewal. The lease renewal was known prior to the reference date of April 1st of 18. The signed paperwork didn't get processed until, as you'll see there on page 18, didn't get processed until April 9th. But the owner knew that the tenant was renewing. These things don't happen in isolation. There's notice required if they're vacating, so they knew they were renewing, and they knew the rates that they were renewing at. So that's shown on page 18, and you'll see there at the top that they've actually occupied this property since May of 2000. So it's a long-term tenancy, and they've been in there. But if we take a look at page 19, it's the next page, under paragraph 3, you'll see there that in paragraph 2, the renewal term, and that's confirmed, and we'll go through in a moment. But in clause 3, they show there that the minimum rent is in advance on the first day of each and every month during the first 5 years of the term, and that base rent is $8.95 plus additional rent of 96 cents per square foot for the tenant improvements for the period, that same period. Now, so $8.95 is the rent, and I'm going to tell you that it's a semi-gross rent. So when you take a look and go over our information here, you take a look on page 16. I believe this is the same information that the city has provided. And we look in the left-hand column, and even though it indicates a net rent as we go down, you'll see there that there are property tax recoveries, but there are no recoveries for management, and there are no recoveries for insurance, and there are no recoveries for professional fees on this property. Those expenses are shown in the middle column, and as we go down, we obviously exclude depreciation as an expense. We have made an adjustment, as we show there on page 7, go to page 7, third paragraph, 9,400 square feet is what they used. So we've gone with the assessor's rental area, but we've gone with the actual 93,154 as the rental amount, but we've made an adjustment for the non-recovery of insurance. That's the only adjustment we've made here. So we go from $8.95 to $8.73 per square foot for the non-recovery expenses. We have not made an adjustment for management fees. We have not made an adjustment for professional fees here. So the actual true net rent in this case, and then perhaps the assessor might wish to amend the city's records on this one, $8.73 per square foot. That's the rental rate that we've used, and again, I've looked at different rental comparables. I always take a look at the market to see if it's something wrong with the lease. Interestingly, so vacancy 4% for exactly the same reasons that we've just gone over. Our shortfall rate, again, no discrepancy or dispute, 375. Shortfall is at 7%. Again, the non-recovered expenses at 7%. As discussed earlier, the assessor, interestingly, in this case, has again used a capitalization rate of 6%. Now, the previous property built in 2009, they used 6%. This property is built in 1999, and they use 6%. Sorry, my apologies. It was actually built in 1992, and that's verified on both page 13 and 14 of our brief. Now, I know from previous questioning that there are a number of factors that can affect the cap rate. This particular case, we have a property that is 9638 square feet. The capitalization rate range by age, 1980 to 1994. There are other ones, 1980 to 1994, and then 1995 to 2009. So how do we end up with the same cap rate in different age groups? Doesn't make sense. In terms of age, they're both, in terms of occupancy, they're both single occupant buildings. They have the same risk associated with them based on the 1992 age and our previously described information. My personal view is that 7% is a more appropriate rate in this case, and that's what we applied. And so on page 9, we again go through the mathematics, and we're looking for a reduction to $1,052,000. We show some overhead pictures, sort of angular Google Earth pictures to give you a flavor for the building on page 12. I've already gone over the lease agreement, and then on the covered insurance, and so with that, that's the information we wish to provide on this property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, questions?
Just a couple, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your page 9, you're using an NOI of 73,666.
Yes.
Turning to page 16,
Yep.
you'd agree that the NOI on the statement is 73,942.
Well, of course, there's no vacancy in there, there's no shortfall in there, so it's an apples and oranges comparison.
Okay, but you would agree that it is 73,942?
Yes, on an apples to oranges comparison,
And then there's also a depreciation,
which we do not consider or include.
so 11,027. If we add those together, it would be 84,969.
Again, apples and oranges.
Okay. And just your comments about the cap rate groupings, this being the same cap rate as the previous property. You said that the grouping was from 95 to 2009?
There are 5 age groupings.
Yeah. So the other building, if it was built a year later, would have actually been a 5.5 cap.
I don't know how the model would calculate it,
Okay.
but it was the same cap rate as the city model seems to have applied here. Makes no sense to me on a building that is more than 15 years older.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
Just a little bit of confusion on my part. I'm looking at your page 16,
Thank you.
and the depreciation underlined,
Yeah.
11027.
Sorry, where are you?
I'm on page 16 of the appellant's
Middle column.
middle column.
Yep.
Yeah.
Annual expenses depreciation underlined at 11027. Now, I'm not seeing that same line item in the certified documents for the city. Am I missing something?
This
How
was...
could yours be different than theirs?
So let me just explain before the assessor answers. We print these out from the city's website, so I wouldn't know, or I don't have an explanation as to why it would be on there.
So you have a depreciation here
Yes, and that's,
that you printed from the city's website, you're
Yes.
saying.
that's as submitted by the owner.
May I redirect to the city? You have a page 14 that doesn't have that document, which I assume comes from your website.
This is true. I accidentally grabbed it from, we have 2 columns when we enter it. I don't want to go too much into detail. I accidentally grabbed the wrong one. The depreciation was taken out. We've since been directed to use the original mailers.
So,
It's my turn to ask questions.
sorry,
Yeah, please.
I'll come back, thank you,
Yeah.
I apologize. That's-
Sorry.
Yes.
Can you just explain that? Let's go into it a little bit further so I understand it. I'm missing something.
I can't go into it much further. I should have used the original one. I apologize.
And that would have had
I'll
the
leave it there.
depreciation in
Yes,
it?
that's correct.
So you...
I don't think anyone argued that depreciation should come out. We wouldn't use it in evaluation, just like a mortgage, etc. That's why it was taken out. Next time I will use the original documents.
Okay, so this is not the original
These were generated 2 weeks ago. We've since been directed to use the originals. And that's what I'll use going forward.
Thank you for that clarification.
And so,
Hang on.
sorry,
Please,
Hang on.
bear with me.
oh, I thought you were done, I apologize.
No.
Thank you,
Just
sorry.
looking at my document.
Then we get to ask more questions.
Yeah, okay. You can tell I'm jumping at the bit.
I can tell.
So when your model does the calc on cap rates, you have those fairly structured tables that we've now heard about a couple of times based on year. And square footage would be another element of differentiation.
We have a rent model, which will generate a rent for a property that's sold.
But I'm talking about cap rates.
Yes,
This is a model-driven cap rate.
correct.
And that cap rate is driven by, from what I understand, a series of threshold years.
Correct.
We talked about it briefly here today.
Correct.
It's really more pronounced than that. And
There's-
yours may differ from the appellants, or from a variety of appellants, but the other element is square footage.
Location, size, and
Yeah,
year.
but square footage is also
Correct.
a column, if I understand that correctly.
Correct.
Okay, so so one could assume if your cap rate is a point apart, it could have been impacted by some of those other variables that we're talking about.
Correct. The smaller the building, the lower the cap rate,
Yeah.
economies of scale,
Okay.
location adjustments, obviously some locations are better than others, and then age, which is
Yeah.
self-explanatory.
Yeah, I mean, age should be one constant, but there are all those other variables. I get that. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions.
My question would be, and this is maybe where you get to jump in. I'm seeing 4 different figures for net operating income. In your brief, there's 73,666 and 73,942. In the assessor's brief, there is 84,970 and 8585.
So wait, sorry, where's the other one?
Well, in your workup on page 4
Well, the workup's model driven.
and 5, there's 8585. And on your back page, 14, there's 84,970.
So the page 5, 80,585, that's model driven. This one, although we have taken out depreciation, which I apologize for, is the actuals.
This is the actuals.
Minus
You're
depreciation.
just applying
Plus
model plus actuals.
Plus depreciation.
Plus depreciation, okay. And then in your case, Mr. Boardroom, you've got numbers that are $300 apart.
In terms of,
NOI.
ours is based on our calculations from the net operating income, not off of the income expenses. We have applied the net income, net of the insurance expense because it's not recovered. And that's the only adjustment we made to the $8.95 per square foot. And then we go through the sequence of non-recoverables, vacancy, shortfall.
So then, in the end, what we're really comparing is the 73,666 that you've got on page 9 with the model-driven 8585. Correct? Okay. Is there any more elaboration on that we need?
I don't think so. It's in terms of that, the calculation of our net operating income, I think is fairly transparent. I've provided evidence of the actual lease and the fact that the dollars paid by the tenant to the owner include a repayment of the TIs, which the assessor has already acknowledged we don't consider. And so it's $8.95 less that minor adjustment for non-recoverable expense for insurance. That's where ours comes from. And so I think it's pretty transparent.
All right. Thank you.
I do have some additional questions for the assessor arising from.
All right.
And that's really only 2.
Sure.
So, last property we dealt with, I asked the question whether or not you would identify whether there were alterations as between the correct documents versus what you provided in your evidence.
Obviously, I'm not providing the entire document. I've taken
You're not providing the original
snapshots.
document.
No. I've taken snapshots and I've cut and pasted them into my evidence.
But for this particular property and the last one, you're not providing the original document.
That's correct. I took out depreciation.
You did that or somebody else did?
It was done during the modeling process.
Okay, so as you are presenting this evidence before this board, certainly in the last two cases, forget about the last one, start with this one, the information that you provided on your page 14 doesn't reflect the actual document that's submitted, correct?
Once again, we've taken depreciation out. I don't think anyone's arguing that depreciation should stay in, unless you are.
So let's get back to the question. That's an altered document, yes?
Okay.
And so the other question I had, and you brought it up in terms of economies of scale, rental rates as you get to smaller units will be higher than rental rates for similar buildings of a larger size, correct?
Correct.
So if you have a higher income would generate a higher cap rate, right?
Higher income, higher cap rate, correct.
So if we have smaller buildings, which I think you agreed would generate higher income, how do we drive a lower cap rate out of that for smaller buildings?
I don't understand where you're going with that.
You've agreed with me, all other things being equal, that a smaller building will rent for more than a larger building.
Yes,
More income drives higher cap rates.
correct.
You've indicated that the model suggests that cap rates on smaller buildings is lower because of lower risk.
Yes, sir.
And so how then do you have the model driving incomes on smaller buildings higher, and yet the cap rates generated by the model are lower? How does that work?
We're reflecting what we see in the market.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That finishes up 21 Old Man Street. Let's just take 2 minutes
Thank you.
for a break. Okay, we will carry on now with 35 Winfield Way. Mr. Brown, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 35 Winfield Way, 13095314500. Consists of 3 buildings, all 1-story, built between 1985 and 2004. We're using an effective age of 1990 on this property. Wall heights range from 11 to 20. Zone M2, leasable area at 18,833, and land to plan at 3.08. There was a sale in 2014 for $1.8 million for rental comparables on page 3, ranging from 2015 to 2017 lease start, 13,000 to 18,000 area, 12 to 31 feet wall height, 51 to 07 year built, 884 to 975 for the range in rents. We're using 852 for the subject property, rent per square foot, 6.5 cap, generating the assessed value at $2,296,000. Pictures on page 10. Once again, the same area as the preceding properties. It's actually located on a cul-de-sac, pie-shaped lot, backing onto Omans Creek. Company's called Creative Food Products. They make pizza pops and stuff like that.
Sorry, what?
They make like pizza pops and some pastries and stuff like that for sale. Some aerial photographs on page 12. Page 13 shows the plan area. So the top 2005 edition bottom is 97. This is, they're showing it as not owner occupied, but the corporations are related, so we haven't relied on any of that data on pages 14 and 15. This was appealed in 2019. The Board of Revision decided on a revised value of $1,935,000. Today I'm defending $2,296,000, and I ask that it's confirmed. Thank you.
Mr. Boardroom, question?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Now, on your page 1, you've shown the property was built over a number of years. Do you have any breakdown of what was built and when?
On page 13,
Okay.
so the top left-hand portion says 2005 edition.
Okay, yeah.
Bottom rectangular or square area, 97 edition. So I'm assuming the rest is the original 1985.
Okay. And so visually looking at this, that would be more than half the area, right?
Was additions.
The original structure, more than half the area?
I would not agree. I believe the original was that L-shaped design.
And you indicated also on your page 1 that the wall heights are between 11 and 20 feet.
Correct.
Leaving aside the 11-foot, would you consider 20-foot to be inferior in terms of industrial expectations?
Different tenants require different wall heights.
In terms of the industrial market in general, is a lower wall height, like 20-foot wall height, so you'll have less than that clear ceiling inside. Is that an inferior property in terms of industrial expectations?
Depends on the use, but obviously, generally the higher the wall height, the better.
Now, just turning back above that under effective year built, you actually show here 1990 to 2004.
We're using an effective year of 1990 for the whole building.
1990. And you referenced that it's sitting on a pylon, and you've shown some pictures on your page 12. It's actually a reverse pylon, correct? So you have the larger section at the front, smaller at the back.
I mean, the driveway is the smallest section of the parcel.
Right,
So
and
that
so
would-
there is no access, and looking at your picture in the bottom of page 12, there's no access to the rear, correct?
No.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no question.
I have no questions.
So I'm going to start at page 3, and just to let you know in advance, we've provided sort of supporting documentation on our page 25. We show the breakdown there. That's a typo, that should actually be number 3. So 1985 is a wood frame construction. That's unusual for industrials, number 1. 20-foot wall height, 10,800 square foot in size according to the city's records. That's more than 50% of the building area. We call that has to be assessment on that. There was a 1996 addition according to the city's information, a steel frame addition, again 20-foot wall height, and then they have 4,343 square feet added in 2004 with 11-foot wall height. That's low for industrial properties. We took a look at a number of rental comparables, and we show them on page 8. They're all, so they were filtered by sort of age and size. 1725 St. James Street, I can tell you, I have for this cycle inspected that property, much superior to the subject. That is what you would describe as modern industrial design with tilt-up concrete panels. It's a multi-tenanted flex warehouse with five or six buildings on it. If you include the Tim's restaurant in one corner of the lot, the balance are the flex warehouse style. It's the great big complex you drive by right at the corner of St. James and Winnipeg. Can't miss it. So even those rents, based on the size, between 7 and 945. see other rents in there, average 763, median 759. This property, in its location with its partially wood frame structure, with its partially very low wall height, and the balance of it being low for industrial standards, we went with $7 per square foot as what, in my opinion, of the rental rate that could be achieved in this property for it to be exposed to the open market. I can tell you that the owner/occupant is actually the same folks that run Ginny's Bakery on Norway, same ownership. So, for the reasons already talked about in terms of vacancy, 4%, 375 shortfall, 7% non-recovered. Again, I don't understand the model 6.5 cap, but I think that 7% is more appropriate here. There was an inspection of the property in July of 2018. I did not do the inspection. It's one of my colleagues, but there were very descriptive notes and these pictures on file that I reviewed. I did this property last cycle as well. And so I'll leave you to go through that at your leisure. Page 13 and following, as you go through it, you'll see that this is just ordinary industrial space. There is some, what I'll describe as almost modular freestanding cooler space in there, so they can knock down the walls, take it out, should they vacate. So based on all of that, we're looking for a reduction, show on page 11, sorry, 10, we're looking for a reduction so that should be 7.25%.
What's good?
It should be 7.25% on page 9. There was an adjustment for the wall height. And so we're looking for a reduction down to $1,584,000. In terms of the sale, I'll come back to that. I do recognize that there was a sale in 2014, as the assessors indicated, but there are a number of reasons to disregard it, including the third Canadian edition of the appraisal of real estate, which at page 14.3 says a single sale does not necessarily reflect the market value. Similarly, there are 7 or 8 municipal board orders that I cite here, the most recent being 2014, where the municipal board has consistently indicated that they do not rely on the single sale of the property. That's the case here. That will be the case that we'll also hear on 220 on this case. So you can accept any questions. That's the information we wanted to present here.
Mr. Brown?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Richford?
Yes, just on the point of the sale, your comment on a single sale, you're aware there was a sale in 209 at $1.1 million?
2009, well, aside from being super removed.
But there is a second sale, and it does kind of establish a trend, doesn't it?
Certainly without knowing the details of it, I'm hesitant to comment on it. I don't, it's certainly not within my information.
Sorry.
I don't believe that's within my information.
No, it's in the brief presented by the city.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to comment.
No further questions.
I have nothing, Mr. Chair.
And I was hoping for a map here, hoping it would be yours. Thank you. Any other one? Where is Winfield Way? Sorry, I'm a little lost.
Yeah. If we, think about this for a moment. I believe as we go out, Route 90.
Oh, there's one, sorry. There is one in the assessor's report, page 10. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, yeah, just off Route 90, north of the airport.
You can see on the bottom picture Brookside Boulevard running on the left-hand side.
Does this constitute part of the sorry, the name is escaping me, the newly promoted area for industrial development
No,
around the
no,
airport.
no, this is, that's, the larger area would be known as Centerport. And
Centerport.
We go through, if you want to look through our industrial cap rates, I won't go over that. There's a fairly lengthy description of that in there. There's also a fairly lengthy description of what's going on outside of the city of Winnipeg in terms of industrial development. Most of what you're thinking about is going to be not Centerport, but will be north of Route 90 in the arm of Rosser, which has no business tax. It's an unfair playing field, a level playing field in that respect. This is what I'll describe as a mature area of the Open State. And so no, it's not that.
Okay. And your 17...
If I could just add, Brookside, it may, in the assessor's maps he alluded to, you'll see Brookside there. That is not the Brookside Boulevard that Route 90 turns into. It's a, I'll describe it as poorly asphalted roadway. It runs behind Brookside Cemetery.
That's the north-south one?
That's the north-south one, but it doesn't turn into the real, what you'll generally know as Brookside Boulevard until you get further north on Route 90. So it's Brookside Boulevard in name, but it isn't the traffic corridor that you normally think.
And then your 1725 St. James, that's the one that you were referring to as being at the corner of St. James and Notre Dame?
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, so when you look at, if you look at you see the word west in there, and directly diagonal slightly downward across Notre Dame, that's that location.
Okay.
There, so.
All right. Thank you. That's all my questions. And we will do, let's bring us to 220 Old Creek, which we almost did a little while ago.
That's correct. We started it.
We're skipping over.
Yes, we're going to skip over 2310 Logan because it could be a longer. Okay, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subject located at 22 Omans Creek, 13095411900. Defending an assessed value of $2,493,000. Property consists of one building, one story, built in 1997, 22-foot wall height, 18,156 square feet of leasable area, and a plan area of 3.9. Page 2, subject sale history. 2013, there was a sale for $1,925,000. We did conduct a company search, and we spoke with the purchaser, who confirmed it was arm's length and not related parties. I have some rent comparables on the following page. Wide range of square footage from 11,500 to 25,645. Wall heights from 12 to 31. Year built from 51 to 07. And rents from $884 to $975. Subject on the following page, we're using $8.85 per square foot, 3.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, $3.75 per square foot shortfall, and capitalized at 6%, yields the assessment at $2,493,000. Pictures on page 10. Once again, located in the same area on Omans Creek, on the corner of Brookside Boulevard and Omans Creek. Some exterior shots on page 12. This is a two-story loading docks on the rear side. Have the plan on page 13, that's the first floor plan. Second floor plan on page 14. Page 15 shows, okay, I guess just the front is 2-story, the rear is 1-story. Which is why the plan is smaller. This is owner occupied on the last page, so no rents to be extracted from that. Based on that evidence, we ask that the assessment be confirmed at $2,493,000. Thank you.
Ms. Boardroom.
Thank you. Okay. So as you're selecting rental comparables, you're relying on the information within the city's system, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If we take a look at your page 3, 630 Kernahan, that's the bottom one. Were you aware that there was some information forwarded to the city on this property in early December?
No.
And I'll provide the rebuttal on that. In fact, it was sent to Mr. Penner, Mr. Harling, and Mr. Pollock.
I'll take your word for it. You can take it out.
They didn't communicate with you?
I might not have been there that day.
Okay.
You can take it out if you like.
Oh, no, I'm happy to leave it in. In fact, I'm going to present a rebuttal on it. If we take a look, and so when you're selecting rental comparables, you would look for properties with some degree of comparability, yes?
Correct.
So if we take a look at the third and fourth comparables on page 3, effective year built 1957, 1951, wall heights of 12 and 13 feet. How are those in any way comparable to the subject?
Similar size, similar area.
But certainly in terms of age and ceiling height.
It goes to show you that ceiling height does not always affect the rent in a negative way.
There weren't any other rents out there that do similar?
These are the best rents of the time.
Okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread. Questions? Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
Sorry. Go ahead, yeah.
If I look at this plan, sorry, page 13, that's the plan of this?
That's the first floor plan.
That's the first floor plan. So, this isn't so much as a warehouse as a showroom, is that what this is?
They're using it as a showroom. I believe they sell hair care products.
Oh, I see, okay.
But there is loading doors at the back. They've converted the storage into office, it looks like.
So, sorry, but on this plan, where is the front?
The front would be facing the bottom of the page, of the showroom.
Well, I'm looking at this photo,
Yeah.
this facade, is where on page 13 when I'm looking at page 13?
The bottom, the showroom
It is
area.
to the very bottom, okay. With offices then at the back,
Correct.
and the loading bay at the back?
Correct.
Where on this plan is the loading bay? My apologies if I'm being thick here, but
Is this it? In the front? No, that can't be right.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to show it on the
It is this,
plan.
it is here, because it's around the,
If I might, you'll see some better pictures.
better pictures? All right, I'll leave it then for your elaboration. That's all my questions.
May I?
Yes.
I'm looking at page 16 on your document.
Yeah.
Last page.
Yeah.
Is this considered a completed document?
It is, it's owner occupied, so there's no rents. And then the expenses are filled out.
Okay. I've not seen one like that before.
I didn't even put the tenant roster in because there was nothing to be gleaned up. I don't even think they filled it out because it's owner occupied, so there's no rents, so.
So it just shows the total expenses
Yeah.
of business taxes.
All right.
That's fine, thanks.
Mr.
I
Bowman?
have some rebuttal, and I'm going to apologize, because I know I copied it, but I suspect I left it at the office. So maybe I can show it to Mr. Brown first.
it's up to the chair.
That's the sole content of the rebuttal material? Okay, if you wouldn't mind.
Included a copy of the relevant portion of the email.
I said I'd take your word for it. I'm not contesting it.
We'll file it.
Or perhaps you could just do expedited things, perhaps the board could just take a look at it, you can copy it at the end of the hearing. I'll just leave that here. Okay. So that is actually a rent roll. You'll see there on pages 2 and 3, there was some communication as between Mayor Froelich of the department and us. I got client consent because there was a discrepancy as between reported rents and actual net rents within 630 Carnahan. And so I provided, and it's more than a single page, but you'll see there that I have redacted all the information other than relates to this property. But all of the rents reported in there are different than the city has entered in their system. So I bring this to Mr. Brown's specific attention so he can ensure that the information within the city's record is corrected. But you'll see there that the rental rate, net rental rate there is significantly lower than the department is showing in their evidence. And it's the last rental comparable. On their page 2, I think it is, 3. So the very last comparable on page 3, you'll see there that the size, or in size 13,593, remains the same. The rental rate is not $9.32. And that's a prime example of when I talked earlier about alarms going off when I see an odd number like $9.32. Normally what you see is something like that, nice and rounded. That's typically what you'll find in industrial areas. So, certainly when I see odd numbers like this, I look, I check it out, I ask questions. So, I'll leave that with you. And if I might, unless Mr. Brown has some questions.
Any questions? No.
Or any questions?
I mean, I've said you can strike that rent off. I'm not debating it, so.
Okay. Fellow members, questions?
No. And I want to clear that in on the record in particular, so Mr. Brown will return to the city and have their records corrected.
Thank you.
So we do show some exterior pictures in answer to your question on our page 13. And if you look at the top picture on page 13, that's actually, am I running over time? Okay. That's actually from Brookside Boulevard, so it's not the high-speed transit corridor, traffic corridor. And there you'll see the two loading. One is a dock level loading, one is grade level loading. That's the, so that would be the west side of the building. And then on page 13, you'll see the front of the building there, as you see it from, as well as we can see it from Clemens Street. If you look over at page 14, though, interestingly, the rear of this property is not, and so the property is not, it doesn't have a great neighbor to the rear, let's put it that way. That's a pulse hauling fuel tank. I've actually done the fuel on that thing. I have no information on whether there's contamination on the site. I do know that there is truck traffic going in and out of there frequently. So it's not like it's a quiet, fine location on Clemens Creek Boulevard in this location. So we took a look at some rental comparables again on page 8. And again by size and by age. And there's, some outliers in there, low $3.93 and a high of $10. We didn't filter them out or exclude them, they're all in there. Average is $709, median is $760. On page 9, we've actually selected $8 as an appropriate rent, given the physical characteristics of this property. There is, in fact, in my view, nothing wrong with the warehouse area. Having a showroom in there isn't unusual. I know you asked that question. 630 Carnahan, and you've seen the rent roll on that with an extra color. I inspected that property a number of years ago when it was actually physically occupied by the owner, Palliser, and they had the entire mezzanine level set up as a showroom. And the mezzanine level was in excess of 20,000 square feet. Showroom, display their furniture to buyers. And so they would fly in buyers, they would have a look along the mezzanine. So it's not unusual to have a showroom in warehouses, particularly for wholesaling. So to sort of just quickly answer your question, it's not unusual. In this particular case, based on the age of the property, 1997, so the department again is using $6, and so in 1997 we got the same $6 cap rate. I think based on all the information, we're in the 90s, varied from the 6.5 and gone to 6.75. And so using the $8 rent, again, 4% vacancy rate that we talked about before, 7% non-recoverable. We're looking for a reduction to $1,881,000. And for the same reasons that I disregarded on the sale price on the previous property, I disregarded it here as well. 2013, you start to get really far removed from the reference date. It's an Ontario company. I don't want to speak to people overpaying, but you find out-of-market purchasers tend to think that Winnipeg prices are a deal. So they pay what they pay. It's far removed. The income approach is applied and preferred by both the city and us. And so based on all of that, we're looking for a reduction as outlined. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Brown?
I was going to ask him why it was lower than the sale, but he addressed that, so no question.
Mr. Whitbread?
No.
I think we're done.
Do we have time for the next one? I know, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I know Mr. Brown has to go. I can see
blowing
Mr. Brown
up.
has to go.
My wife's spoken twice in the last 10 minutes. So.
I apologize to her, tell her it's my fault.
No, I
That was
will.
my fault, you believe that.
I'll probably blame it on Brad. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, panel members. Thank you. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. So that, so
We're done. This
know.
concludes our hearing.
she slipped in, but there is a document to be copied for the file and for the board. That lease extract.
Where did we wind up with it?
This was there, yeah.
That needs to be copied, so,
Are the files?
yeah. Or you can keep that one. If you're good with not having one, I'm okay.
I think that we can just say no more.
For
We all looked at it.
I think I've got 5 copies sitting on the printer.
Is it for the property only?
Yes.
Oh, then that's fine.
Also, do you want to just save this separate? 'cause
Yes.
it'll be held over?
That will be, let's
Can I have your item 9?
keep that material separate. You want that separate? This is the one that's for,
All the
So-
study stuff, yeah.
Just a question.
but this is item number 9. We're not dealing. with
Okay,
number 9,
so
it's
you
gonna have to
are-
be dealt with another day.
Adjourning
Number 9.
number 9.
Is that something that we need to say on the record?
I think so, yes.
So then we did, the camera's still running?
Everything's still running.
In that case, then I will make note of the fact that the item number 9 on the docket, which is 2310 Logan Avenue, we have not had time to deal with today because of time constraints of various parties, and that will be dealt with at a later date on another docket.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do that, but I...